Warming up at the bullpen, the pitcher, Matt Moore.
Se incorpora el resto del equipo.
And the rest of the team players.
This is a Tampa Bay team that roster had 34 players on it, 28 of which are active as the rest of them come out. Consider that the Rays as a franchise, the largest crowd they ever played in front of was just over 55,000 back at Yankee Stadium in 2002. And they are going to be pushing that crowd today. So to culminate what has been a unique experience for all of them, now you're looking at a stadium that's going to hold roughly 50,000, including 2 presidents. The Rays' baseball plan is to play it, for the most part, like they would a spring training game this late in spring training. Meaning Matt Moore's likely to go 5-6 innings if his pitch count allows. Most of the regulars will stay in the game.
El equipo Cuba como home club está dirigido por...
And now the Cuban national team.
Team Cuba as the home club is managed by Victor Mesa.
Longtime Cuban manager Victor Mesa with a standing ovation.
Integrado por la siguiente alineación.
It has the following lineup.
Jardín central.
Center fielder,
Roel Santos. Campo corto.
shortstop,
Jordan Manduley. Bateador designado.
designated hitter,
Josvani Alarcón. Primera base.
first baseman,
William Saavedra. Jardín derecho.
right fielder,
José Adolis García. Tercera base.
third baseman,
Yuris Belgracial. Segunda base.
second baseman,
Junior Paumier. Receptor.
catcher,
Fran Camilo Morejón. Jardín izquierdo.
left fielder,
Denis Laza. Lanzador Josvani Torres calentando en el bullpen.
warming up at the bullpen, the pitcher, Josvani Torres.
Se incorpora el resto del equipo.
And the rest of the team players.
They've been playing baseball on this island since the late 1800s, introduced first by sailors and students from the United States of America. And today, for the second time in almost 6 decades, a team from the United States comes to play in Cuba with the eyes of 2 presidents on the game. And now it should be a special moment, the national anthems of both countries.
Los himnos de Cuba y Estados Unidos.
And now, please all rise for the national anthems of Cuba and the United States.
Al combate corren guayameses, que la patria os contempla orgullosa.
Now the players will lift the children that they walked on the field with into their arms as the opening ceremony to this historic baseball game continues.
Tell who has kids and who does not right now.
It's the way they carry it.
From center field, pigeons are released.
A lot of them, Carl. A lot of them. How did the Rays go back to spring training in Florida with that subdued environment?
That's today's version of the flyover, the pigeons. We'll come back, and historical figures, not only on the Major League Baseball level, but the Cuban level as well. The ceremonial first pitch set to be thrown out. Pedro Luis Lazo will throw it out, representing the Cuban national team, and Luis Tiante, El Tiante, of Indians and Red Sox fame, will throw out the first pitch, representing Major League Baseball and obviously Cuba as well. As Barack Obama enjoys some time with former Yankees and now Hall of Fame manager Joe Torre.
You notice what the Cuban national team is doing. They salute Raul Castro before going back into the dugout. It's a big tradition here in Cuba.
At that point, President Obama was engaged in a conversation with Torre. And the traditional wave makes its way around Estadio Latinoamericano. There are several fans, if you will, out there in center field, all part of the opening ceremony, who've taken up the two sections behind center field, to the left and right of the pitcher's eye black. They've been here a couple of days preparing as well. They had their own training for this. Why not?
Let's evaluate this right here. All right.
Well, look at Raul trying to follow. So no chance.
It had made its way to third base. Better late than never.
Fooled by the changeup.
Seems like a lot of the soccer field where you see the kids with the players, and now you hear this where it's traditionally
the umpires are a combination of those from Cuba as well as from Major League Baseball. The two umpires from Major League Baseball, Angel Hernandez and Laz Diaz, both ties to Cuba, relatives. Laz's dad was one of those who left on a boat amidst 20-foot swells. He is there with his back to us, Angel Hernandez, center screen right. Hernandez has come back a couple of times on missions, and the opportunity for both was one that they dearly wanted to be a part of. But Laz tells the story, as we've heard so often the last couple of days, about the defections and the difficulties and the challenges and the unthinkable risks that you take, that his dad was on a boat that was experiencing those swells and he would be at the top of a wave, and then he would be at the bottom and look up and see a 20 to 22 foot wave. And Laz, when he was young, was a bit skeptical about that, and he then asked other people that were on the boat to confirm, and they did confirm. And Laz was a true believer, and there you see him now. Several of the Rays players have taken those white roses and brought them over to where the President of the United States is, shaking hands with Barack Obama through the screen. I think the effort is to give the girls and Michelle Obama the flowers, which is what's happening now. While many of the Rays are on the field stretching, the rest of the roster has come over to share in the historical moment. Being a baseball player for the Tampa Bay Rays, you find out we're going to Cuba, and then you find out the President is going to be in Cuba with us. How you can, as a 23-year-old, get your head around all this.
I think it'll settle in later. Right now, they're getting an unbelievable education in a country to the south of the United States, which they never even thought that they were going to be able to be in.
What's going on, man? Appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. So you're coming in for relief? You're not used to that, are you? You're going to be great, man.
So many ways, Chris Archer is becoming a face of baseball. As we learned last year when he worked with us in the World Series, is intelligent and an easy person to talk to, who's so interested in so many other things than just baseball.
I remember first meeting Chris Archer covering a game, and I heard across the room, Mr. Glanville, Mr. Glanville. I was like, who's this guy talking to? But he was then 22 years old, always respectful, and turned into a great talent.
A huge Cuban hero, Luis Lasso, will throw out the first pitch, a gold medal winner. 42 years young, and Luis Tiant to his right. El Tiante, 75 years young, four-time 20-game winner. He was and played in Cuba as a little boy. Star of the 75 World Series for Boston. Lazo pitched for the Cuban national team, and he's got a couple of gold medals, a couple of silver medals in 2000, 2008. And in the inaugural WBC, the World Baseball Classic in 2006, Lazo pitched 4 2/3 innings in the semifinal win. Archer is doing his best to get a glove to the President. They're having some trouble. Balls don't go through that, let alone gloves.
This is a decoy. It's a fake door.
Luis Tiant also now talking with both Presidents Castro and Obama, shaking the hand of Michelle. The screen here extends all the way from the wall in front of the President to the rafters here, so foul balls to anybody behind home plate or up here in the press box are impossible. They can't get to us.
I say we're pretty safe here, Carl.
We are. And you can see the netting goes all the way to the top of the stadium. There have been intense and immense renovations done to this ball field as well. upwards of $200,000 to $300,000. Clay, grass, all imported. And we now have contact. The glove has made it through.
Those are cut it or something.
And will be put in the hands of the president, who continues to wave to those a few boxes over. There are many reasons to be excited about the Rays, and Archer is certainly at the forefront of them as the Cuban national team takes the field, which allows us to set the table for the leadoff hitter for the Rays today, and that is Dairon Verona, and he will be attempting to put the ball in play against the defense, which has become famous, certainly in Major League Baseball, and I think perhaps you two can back me up on it, that with all due respect to the offensive players from Cuba, at least in the beginning with some of the great shortstops, they were known for their defense.
Right, Ordonez and all of those that were able to leave. You see defense, that's exactly what Cuba's about. Most of their potent offensive players have defected, but the defense, that's traditionally very good.
Yasmani Torres will pitch. Each team has a significant amount of pitchers that they can use. Torres is by no means the youngest, nor perhaps the best Cuban pitcher, but he is arguably as savvy and experienced as any, and perhaps that will allow him to have some success against the Tampa Bay Rays today. His fastball sits in the 80s. He throws a forkball or a screwball to kind of fool hitters.
He's a control guy, and he's going to use deception, movement, location, generally keeps the ball around the strike zone. And he's been around the block here. He saw 12 seasons, 35-year-old, and has a lot of experience over time. So use deception to win the ball game.
The first man hitting is going to be Dairon Verona, the Cuban native, followed by Brad Miller, who they picked up to bolster their offense a little bit. Longoria, Dickerson, another offensive add. Kevin Kiermaier was the best defensive player in all of baseball last year, and arguably one of the best seasons historically. Rene Rivera will catch. James Loney will be playing first base. Verona's introduction before the game was met with, I would characterize it as muted for somebody who called Cuba home and played for their team for 7 years. But the Rays will make sure, as his name is announced, that they give him the credit that they believe he deserves. Verona has his name announced, and the Rays players all come out of the dugout to give him a standing ovation. When his name was announced here in the stadium, nobody applauded.
A lot more subdued than what I thought we were going to hear from the fans, and a lot of it, he was never really in the media.
And you saw the significance of the moment as he swings at the first pitch and pops it up. With the wind blowing, it's an out. So one pitch, one out, as Verona becomes the first ever to defect and return to play in Cuba. 3 years ago, he left on a boat with his mom, convinced his mom to go, and he got a chance to come back and be reunited with his niece and other family members this week.
And for all of you at home, that is not high fives for hitting a pop-up. That's for being able to make the trek back. A very courageous trek. I imagine those emotions were unbelievable. The heart rate.
And now Brad Miller will step in for the Rays, and the first pitch he sees is a strike. Well, I don't think you can imagine the emotions he was feeling. You can't. It'd be interesting to hear what he says about that moment. He was able to swing the bat. He was able to actually make contact.
I think both feet were off the ground when he was swinging. That's how light he was feeling on his feet.
You can't say enough the sacrifice of these players. I mean, when, they leave their family extended period of years, not even seeing each other. Really difficult for the pursuit of a passion. You pay a heavy price.
Carl, this is one of the adjustments that the Rays players are going to have to make. They're used to seeing a lot of velocity at the major league level now. In Cuba, you really don't see that much velocity anymore. That's the part of the game that has been sacrificed by all the defections. You see a lot of craftiness, a lot of 88, 87 miles per hour.
That's ripped to center field, and a sliding catch out there by Raul Santos. There's the defense we were talking about.
And this is a great play. You know, when you slide in like that, and your body has to be behind the ball, because if you miss it, that's it. That ball's gone, and there's nobody behind you. But he does a nice job of getting the glove under the ball, between the ball and the grass. And the president and the first lady are thrilled.
Raul missed it. He had his glasses on. He didn't have them on.
Who's the bigger baseball fan, Michelle or the president? Now Evan Longoria, the third baseman, adds a called strike.
And Raul Santos in center field. The reason he is playing for the team here, Grandma, is because of the defection of Joannes Cespedes. He took over for Cespedes, and one man's loss is another's gain right there in that team.
All-time leader in home runs in franchise history, Longoria, over 200 of them, coming off a season in which he hopes to improve on. You see the numbers last year, 160 games. And the question that a lot of Rays fans hope is answered in the positive is yes, he can return to a 30 home run potential. That one's on the corner, and a called strike 3. Feels a little bit more than an exhibition game for the folks here in Cuba today. And it all started with Verona's pop-out and then a Web Gem nominee from the center fielder Raul Santos. The executive branch in awe. We'll talk with the president in the second inning of this one.
And welcome back to baseball in Cuba. Our broadcast team is on its way down into the stands to interview the President of the United States. And in the meantime, I have the privilege of interviewing Chris Archer, star pitcher for the Rays. Now, Chris, you got a moment with the President. You shook his hand. You said something, and he said something back. What was that?
He told me he appreciated how thoughtful I was in my interviews and speaking about our opportunity to be here and just in general. And it's probably the highest compliment I've ever had in my life. He wasn't just appreciative of my ability, but of the way that I spoke and carried myself, and I've never had a higher compliment.
You brought a glove over to him. Were you trying to give him a glove?
Yeah. Matt Moore, he knew that he wouldn't have a chance to shake his hand. Matt Moore knew he wouldn't have a chance to shake his hand, but he asked me if I would give his glove, Matt Moore's glove, as a gift to the president, and I did that, and the president made sure to tell me that I told him thank you.
What is it like to play, even though you're not playing, in a major league game where two presidents from these two countries are sitting right over there?
It's unreal. I mean, the whole atmosphere, the whole experience, and then to have those people here. This is an experience that nobody gets to have, and we're very fortunate as a team to be here.
What was it like standing on the field pregame when the national anthems were played as you're holding children?
It was emotional, honestly. I had to fight back some tears. Just thinking about the magnitude of the overall experience, and then the fans, how passionate they are, the chants that they have. It was a special moment for sure.
And the special moment for Dayron Verona, your leadoff hitter. Tell us about that.
Dayron defected from Cuba 3 years ago. Never thought he would have the opportunity to even come back and see his family, see his sister, his niece, his mother, and that all happened through the game of baseball, through this experience. We're changing lives, and hopefully we can continue to do that through this whole experience.
Before today, what was your takeaway from yesterday? All the great things that you got to do.
It was awesome. We went down to the hot corner, and people were telling me stats about myself that I didn't even know. The passion for life, the pure happiness and joy, the fact that they don't have technology so they have to interact with each other is admirable. I don't know how I would handle the situations that they have, but they make the most of it, and I'm definitely going to take that home with me.
What is it about you that makes you so welcome to go walk into a restaurant and talk to the waiters and talk to the cook who made the rice and beans? What is it about you that makes you that way?
I don't know, honestly. It's just something inside me that tells me to maximize the opportunities that I have in life. And connecting with people is something I've always loved to do. It gives me a greater perspective for why we're on this earth. And this trip has significantly altered my life.
What would you tell players on other teams about your trip to Cuba if they ask, how did it go?
I would say that these are the most passionate fans in the world. And that's mainly because they don't get the major league product as frequently as we do. I would encourage people to come check out everything that goes on. Like, literally come here since things are opening up. Come here on a cultural development trip for you and your family, and it's going to make you a better person.
Are you trying to sit next to the president during this game? Is that part of your schedule?
I wish. I'm going to be sitting in here supporting my teammates, but if the opportunity presented itself, I definitely will.
What has been the conversation like? Among the players on your team, as you discuss what you've all seen the last 48 hours here?
You know, at first, some people were kind of skeptical, to be honest. But once we sat down as a group and thought about the magnitude of the experience, it was a no-brainer. And once we landed here, the excitement and the team bonding experience has just been unbelievable. We already had a great energy about our club, and it's elevated to even higher heights now. And I'm looking forward to carrying this energy into the season because we definitely appreciate the opportunities that we're afforded to play this game on the highest level from being here and understanding how passionate people around the world are.
It's just a snapshot, but what have you seen from Team Cuba so far? They look like a major league team to me.
Oh, yeah. They're aggressive. They're hustling. and the passion from this country is bleeding into the way they play.
When you spoke to the president, were you at all surprised that he knew who you were? I mean, every baseball fan does, but he knew exactly who you were when you approached.
Yeah, and I shook the First Lady's hand as well, and he was educating her on who I was. So hopefully there's some potential there, even if they're not in office, to get together and do some things, because they're great in the community. They're really about impacting the youth of this world, and that's one of my missions in life as well. So neither of them responded to my tweets, which I was pretty upset about, but and I told them, but they're obviously pretty busy, and I'm glad they made time for our whole team today.
So you said, why didn't you respond to my tweet? And what did the president say to that?
The First Lady said that they can't get back to everybody. A lot of times it's other people actually checking it and informing her, because they don't have time to scroll through Twitter. They have, first of all, a family plus running the country. But it was all playful. Hopefully I can get a response. If not, I'm totally content with the interaction I had.
On to more serious things, though. Yesterday, it was an enormous day in the world with the president being here and doing real business here. As a citizen, what do you think about what happened yesterday?
What do you mean with
just the president meeting with the Cuban president and all that?
I'm hoping that we're laying the foundation for something special going forward. Obviously, we have differences as countries, differences in opinions on human rights, and hopefully we can find some common ground, and hopefully the Rays are showing the people of Cuba, the government of Cuba, what can be, for lack of a better term, afforded to them if they do open their doors and start to be a little bit more open-minded about their policies.
Nothing against Port Charlotte. Difficult. All right, that's 3 outs in the inning. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brad.
And tell us one more time what a thrill it was to meet the president.
It was unreal. People maybe would call it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but people don't get that opportunity. I'm honored. I'm speechless, honestly.
Thanks so much, Chris. Back to a commercial and then an interview with the president.
This opening day, get your caps on.
This is shaving. A blade. Many blades. Sharp blades. Blades here, blades there, small there. Boom. That's not another blade. This is shielding with lubrication here and here. The new Gillette with Pro Shield lubrication. The new Pro Shield from Gillette. The best a man can get. And one Pro Shield refill gets you up to 1 month of shaves.
Understatement. 2-3 first. With Corey Dickerson as the designated hitter. Wild swing and a miss, and as we've seen over the course of last year, we like to move around the stadium, whether it be different seats, sometimes on a hill at a Little League game. Now we're in the front row, and the reason that we've relocated and there's a vacant seat next to us is that Next half inning, we'll be joined by the president of Barack Obama. So we've brought it down to literally his level here.
We straight went from euchre seats to front row right here.
I think we rappelled down from the booth. It took that.
The good news is we're here. We made it. We're safe. And we're watching baseball as Dickerson lifts one to left field. This one is deep, and it's tailing into foul territory at home run distance. But for the Rays fans who are watching, the idea that Dickerson is now on the team, and we saw Miller earlier, they need to score a little more run this year, and they can be really competitive.
Well, power does that in the middle of the lineup. That's exactly what you want. And the Rays went out this offseason and were able to go and get it. One thing about this stadium is that wind right now is really blowing. You see both the Cuban and the American flag in center field just howling. And that ball from our angle, I really thought it was going to be even in fair territory, and it just sailed away.
Oh, it's tough. The other thing Dickerson brings is the defensive side of the ball. The Rays are all about the metrics, the analytics to put position players in the right spot. Literally with Kiermaier out there, they have so much coverage. They have more than they need.
And right now, Torres on the mound is fooling them with some off-speed stuff there. The second consecutive strikeout for Yosvani Torres.
And this is something that the Major League Baseball players aren't used to. You see a lot of off-speed with taking off, beautifully thrown with 2 strikes. That's where you want it. Into dirt, they pitch backwards a lot. And Major League Baseball players, hard to see.
And once again, we've moved our location from where we were way up top to now literally right behind home plate here, just off the first base side. And we are in the box that has the commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred, behind us. And the president, Barack Obama, a few sections over, will join us once we get to the third out, and will spend some time with us talking about his diplomatic efforts to engage the country of Cuba, as well as the role that baseball is playing in all of it, as we continue to chronicle it here on ESPN.
Carl, I really like these seats. I have the commissioner behind me. Usually he's sitting in the front row. Now he's sitting behind me. Derek Jeter to our left. Right. This is good stuff.
It was good until the commissioner kept tapping us on the shoulder to move. You're a big body. He can't see the game anymore.
Down in front.
I really want to give the commissioner my cell phone so he can take some pictures. Is that all right? I'm going to hand it to him, see what happens.
But this angle does allow us to see what Torres is pitching, and the Rays are having a hard time putting the ball in play with Longoria and Dickerson striking out. Forsythe just swung through one to even the count 2-2.
This is what he does. Torres has the ability to change speeds, take a little bit off, and he gets you off balance. And sometimes that 2-mile-an-hour difference between pitches is the difference between squaring it up and then hitting it off the end of the bat with poor contact.
By no means is Torres a prospect. Already in his 30s, pitches backwards. What I mean by that, starts with off speed and tries to end with the fastball like he did and struck out Evan Longoria in the first.
Good chance, Eddie, here with one out to kind of talk about your dad, of course, one of the great players from Cuba who went on to a Hall of Fame career. But when you begin to play and engage with the sport of baseball on the island of Cuba, what was your dad's sort of recollections as to when baseball became part of his life?
From the very beginning. His childhood, in his neighborhood, that's what it was. You play baseball in the streets, you play baseball in the park, you grow up with it, you talk it, and anytime, any free time, it wasn't about doing something indoors. It was about being outdoors, playing the game.
Yurisbel Garcia, the third baseman, made the play here. And when you say play the game, though, they played a little different game, didn't they?
Yes, they did. They played with bottle caps, chapitas, and with broomsticks. And that really helped with his hand-eye coordination. As a matter of fact, when I was struggling, which that happened a lot, earlier in my career, he went out and he said, all right, I have a broomstick. We went out to the beach in Puerto Rico, and he started throwing these little pine cones. I was swinging and missing. And next thing you know, I'm like, Dad, you can't hit this. He said, give me that. Give me the ball. Give me that thing. So he got the stick. I threw it to him. First one, whack. Almost hit me in the forehead. That's how good his hand coordination was. And that's why he's in the Hall of Fame, and I'm right here sitting next to you and the commissioner.
Were you in the middle of a pine forest? Like, were there a lot of pine cones?
No. They're abundant around the beach area, especially in islands, tropical islands.
There's a rip into left field. That'll be the first hit for the Rays. And rounding first and sprinting into second and safe at second base. Heavy speed out of the box, and man in scoring position.
And Carl, anytime you're grabbing that extra 90 feet, getting the extra base, it happens right out of the batter's box. He didn't hesitate. He understood the play was in front of him, and he made his decision early on. And keep in mind, Kiermaier can flat out fly. This kid is fast.
And that's one scouting report they do have. They did see them take infield today. They also talked about it. They said try to take the extra base with their outfielders. All of them, except the one in right field, has a very, very strong arm.
So a chance here for the Rays to score with Desmond Jennings, the left fielder, now batting. Jennings showed some pop last year, and they definitely have improved a little bit with their offense as the breaking ball stays up high for a ball.
Yeah, the Rays really need Jennings to kind of bounce back. He's a guy, very balanced player, complete package, can base run well. You know, he plays solid defense. He gives them a little power. So he's an all-around player that they really missed a lot with all his injuries recently.
And what Eddie just talked about, if in fact the ball gets hit to the outfield, there's a good chance you'll see Kiermaier, with the speed we know from his defense, perhaps try to score the first run.
Without a doubt. And that's what he, especially in this situation with 2 outs, he will go on contact, taking as big a lead as he can.
Off-speed pitch in for a strike. It takes, what, an inning, 2 innings, or given the situation here, what, 3 innings to kind of settle into a game?
Well, the other side of that coin is, while Torres is settling in, we know with repeated at-bats against the same pitchers, the adjustments are made. So the trick is he gets through that lineup the first time, then what happens after these Rays hitters make adjustment. But believe me, the Rays players are all talking to each other, saying, okay, what does he have? What is he working in and out? And that's what makes these major league players so exceptional. They adjust very quickly.
You saw President Obama there. I'm not sure, but his reaction to that pitch was sort of a nod of like, yeah, that was pretty close. That was a good pitch. You could see where that might have been called a strike, but it wasn't.
And you see the difference right away here in Cuba. You have the pitcher, the catcher, both reacting to the call, where in the United States in Major League Baseball, you don't see that. You don't see the pitcher showing up the umpire. The umpire behind the plate also umpires here in La Serie Nacional. So it's the zone is different, yet from what I heard from Angel Hernandez, it's going to be very, very fair.
Let's think about it. Dickerson hit a ball that was home run deep but foul, and then we saw Kiermaier rip a shot to left. You wonder if perhaps Torres is becoming a little leery of contact, now behind in the count 3-1.
Well, his game is contact. He's not a strikeout pitcher, but it's the type of contact that matters. And he tends to miss the barrel of the bat with a lot of late movement and change of speeds.
First base on ball 4, and a little frustration, I think, shown from Torres, as well as the catcher Morejon.
And you're going to notice the frustration also on the Cuban pitchers. One of the biggest reasons Angel Hernandez, the same way as taught these umpires, listen, this is going to be a major league strike zone. The plate, 17 inches, yet don't forget, with the circumference of the baseball, you still have another 2 1/4 inches on each side. You're going to get at least 22 inches from side to side, no mas. International play, that's a strike. Major League Baseball, that is not.
The first baseman's James Loney, with good speed on the bases for the Rays in both Kiermaier and Jennings. When the Orioles came here in '99, games, in fact, they played 2. They played back in Baltimore. Very competitive games. No blowouts.
Ended 3-2, right? Extra innings.
Loney on the ground. That's through into right field. Kiermaier comes in. The throw home. Not in time. Safe, and the Rays grab a 1-0 lead. That's the speed of Kevin Kiermaier, and a pretty good throw from the right fielder as well.
Well, the throw is where you want it as an outfielder. After the ball gets through, you're coming up charging hard from right field. Now it's all about keeping the ball down with some velocity. So if the throw's a little bit offline, the man can cut it off. But a little too much dirt slowed it down just enough. And Kiermaier, with his speed, backdoor.
We're throwing some emotion.
I'm noticing the First Lady is quite a baseball fan here.
How about that moment there? Obama looks to Castro. Congratulations. It's 1-0. I think Michelle's more of at least more of an outward fan than the president is.
Yeah. Fired up. Well, those are one of the questions situationally, right? Kiermaier sliding here back door.
Love the emotion. And you see not only the emotion from President Obama saying, "We got you, 1-0." Raul?
This is baseball, though. A lot of baseball left here.
It is, and I love the also when Kiermaier slid into home plate, he's also calling safe. Players from the Tampa Bay Rays, they are also feeling excited about this game. It's not a spring training game for them right now. This is a lot of pride going on.
I think you feed off of the emotion of the other team, too, and we got the impression early with the catch in center field. The Cuban team was playing this fairly seriously.
Yeah, I mean, look.
So if they're going to do that, then we're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when you play, you recognize there's a lot of opportunity here. Who knows what could happen? And you perform well. There's players still trying to make the team. Every at-bat counts, every pitch counts. So, you're going to see people at their best.
Bottom of the order has gotten the job done here for the Rays. Rene Rivera, the catcher, bats ninth. Looks at a fastball outside.
And this is one of the situations we're looking at. Now you have James Loney, left-handed hitter at the plate. Rivera, who really struggled offensively last year, on deck. So situationally, you start to think about who do you most want to pitch to. And if you're going to make the mistake, you want to make it more to Rivera at this point.
Slow ground ball. Tricky hop. Force at second. Out at second base. But the Rays get the first run. So it's the President of the United States 1 and Raul Castro right now nothing. He will move from that seat to the seat right between myself and Eduardo Perez as the President of the United States, Barack Obama, joins us to talk about Cuba and baseball and his experiences here. We're back in Havana, Cuba. Spring training 1947. The Dodgers and Jackie Robinson were here. Got a chance to come over with the entire team that year. That was, of course, the year that Jackie broke the color barrier, and the effort was made to keep Jackie out of the limelight as we continue our coverage of this historic exhibition game between the Cuban national team and the Tampa Bay Rays. President Obama will join us in the top of the third inning. There is a seat here with his jersey on it from the Rays, number 44. So he at least will know where he's going to be seated. And Doug, you had a chance to talk to Rachel Robinson as the leadoff hitter is on with a single up the middle, just about what that experience was like in 1947.
Yeah, it was a powerful opportunity. I had a chance to talk to Rachel Robinson, and just the perspective. You know, we're talking about close to 70 years from when he debuted and came to spring training right here in Havana, Cuba, back in 1947. And the perspective to see what has changed through the legacy of her husband and the timeline. She just exemplified a lot of patience and understanding about what it takes for change. She said it's an ongoing struggle, but you have to come to the table. You have to be able to engage mutually. And she really emphasized the points of how she had a great experience here in Cuba, and that gives her a lot of optimism and excitement that 70 years later, as an African-American president, something that she believed her husband could not have even fathomed the times that he was in training camp 70 years ago.
Rachel Robinson is 92 years young.
Oh,
I mean, looks fantastic.
55.
Yes, amazing. And her passion for the sport and for the efforts of Jackie to break the color barrier, and her presence continued in baseball through all the various programs that she's involved with, speaks to what Jackie was all about, which was a lot more than just baseball.
Absolutely. There was an ambassadorship. There was an ambassadorship to everything they were able to accomplish beyond the game. And I'm curious to hear from our president his thoughts on how that is connected, because you recognize here in Cuba, they had their experience in spring training. Many major league teams came down here. How that ties to social change, social justice.
Yeah, and Robinson, who was, of course, one of the great base stealers of all time, would have probably been down on Urizbel Garcia, who got picked off by Matt Moore there as he was caught stealing. Jackie didn't get caught too often. That one misses outside.
Yes.
Earlier this week, Doug did have a chance to talk with Rachel Robinson about Jackie's significance in Cuba.
So, Mrs. Robinson, in 1947, just before your husband broke the color line in baseball, he played and trained right here in Havana, Cuba. What are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling very excited about the possibility for change in the society and having a role in it, even if I'm just in the back seat. And when we came in 47, it was critical for Jack's career for him to do well and to be accepted and to be able to perform up to expectations, his expectations and the team's. And so we were really concentrating more on how he did and how he managed than we were on where we were located.
Well, what do you recall about how the Cuban people treated you sort of as a family?
I recall that at every instance we were well treated. And in 47, in the United States, we had plenty of challenges. We were very sensitive to how we were being received, and we were received beautifully.
If you could reflect, what do you think your husband, Jackie Robinson, would say about this moment now, 7 years later from his debut in spring training in 1947?
Well, first of all, I think he would be just thrilled that we have an African-American president in the United States visiting Cuba. I don't know that he would ever have anticipated that that could happen. None of us did.
What do you most hope from this game moving forward through this social change in this particular relationship between the United States and Cuba?
I think it's important for us to understand that it's mutually important. It's not just one country will be more satisfied than the other, or that there's some advantage that one country had, and in some ways supporting each other, that we will make the big changes and we will make the important changes that will help, that will affect all people, not just a certain level.
Rachel Robinson now, in fact, seeing the President of the United States, Barack Obama, who is going to join us shortly for a conversation about his experiences here, as well as what he hopes to accomplish down the road between the country of the United States and Cuba, and the role that baseball has played in all of that. Of course, the big baseball fan, we've seen the outward expressions from Michelle Obama, and now Barack Obama will join us after getting a few words in with Derek Jeter.
You got an opportunity to clarify right here on national TV. Yes, you do.
You don't want me to tell this story.
I got a much better.
Pleasure. Come on in. Sit over here.
How are you?
How are you, Mr.
Great
President?
To see you.
Good to see you.
Great to see you guys.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you.
Come on, I got a raise. I got a raised jersey. That's what I'm talking about.
What are the White Sox going to say about that?
You know what? As long as he doesn't make me wear it back in Chicago, I'll be okay. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I think before we even get into the baseball and the experience, this has been a very difficult day for the country, for Belgium, and I figured that this would be an opportunity for you to address the many millions who are watching.
Well, I appreciate that. I had a chance to talk to the Belgian Prime Minister early this morning, right after the explosion had happened, and this is just one more example of why the entire world has to unite against these terrorists. The notion that any political agenda would justify the killing of innocent people like this is something that's beyond the pale. We are going to continue with the over 60 nations that are pounding ISIL and going to go after them. In the meantime, obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with those who've been lost and hoping for a speedy recovery for those who've been injured.
Understand. What would you say your experience has been like here for 72 hours, given the goals that you had?
Well, for 50 years, we had no contact with this country, and it was not serving our ultimate goal, which is freedom and opportunity for the Cuban people. And we initiated a new policy of engagement, not out of naivete. We understand that the government here continues to control all aspects of life, that individual freedoms continue to be curtailed, but our belief is that if you've got more Americans traveling, if you've got more commerce, if you've got more interaction, if our ideas and our culture is penetrating this society, that over time that gives us more leverage to advocate for the values that we care about. And obviously the Cuban American community is such a central part of the American experience. We consulted a lot with Cuban Americans before we initiated this change. There's a debate within the community as to whether this is appropriate or not, because there's still a lot of anger and frustration about the history of what the Cuban exiles experienced. But my view has been that if you do something for 50 years and it doesn't work, you got to try something else. And we're going to continue, as we saw yesterday at the press conference and in my speech today, to amplify our concerns about human rights, about people who are being arbitrarily detained or harassed just for speaking their minds or expressing their political views. But this now gives us more leverage and a greater platform to advocate for the things we do.
Would you say then there's momentum for what you're doing based on what you've experienced here?
The good news is what we're seeing is that there's overall support in the United States for this change in policy, but perhaps more importantly, the majority of Cubans, a strong majority of Cubans support it. Now, I met with some dissidents before I came here, those who supported this change in policy, a few who thought that it somehow rewarded or validated the existing government. But what I explained to them is that we will continue to speak out loudly on the things that we care about. That's not going to change. But isolation had, in some ways, empowered those who didn't want to see change, because essentially they were in a position to blame all the problems that they had here on the United States, and we could not do what I did today, which is speak to the entire Cuban population and talk about the values that America cares about and the extraordinary success that Cuban Americans have had when they have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the ability to start their own businesses and so forth.
Mr. President, I'm a first-generation Cuban American raised in Puerto Rico.
Absolutely.
I spent the last 72 hours with my family that has never left Cuba.
Right.
They're here.
Right.
They had their children. They're contemporary with my age, 46.
Right.
What do you tell them and their children about having hope for the future?
I think our goal is that if, as a consequence of the changes in policy, you start seeing small businesses emerge, and you're starting to see people being able to drive their own car or open up their own barbershop and get their own income. If we start seeing more American tourists coming, if we continue to see the remittances, meaning the cash that Cuban Americans earn, being able to send it back to their families, then over time, your families here, other families, they can start building their own small nest eggs. Maybe they can start a business. We're going to continue to put pressure so that people now can be hired not through the government but on their own. And by creating those pockets of freedom and opportunity, over time, changing attitudes start beginning to happen. And people start thinking, you know what, I don't have to risk traveling to Miami in order to succeed. Potentially, I can succeed here. And the more we can create these pockets of opportunity and hope here, when you see the incredible talent and skill and innovation of the Cuban people, I have no doubt that eventually change is going to come.
Well, Mr. President, full disclosure, I played for the Chicago Cubs.
You know what? I like the Chicago connection, and you know, when we're in Cuba, Cubs, White Sox, it doesn't matter.
Well, speaking of social change, Mr. President, Jackie Robinson's legacy. You made a personal commitment bringing in Rachel Robinson, Sharon Robinson, the family here just for this moment, this special connection. So what do you see that connection ties to not only your life and presidency, but also what you see in the future in this potential relationship between the United States and Cuba?
Well, if you think about Jackie Robinson playing in this ballpark a couple months before he breaks the color barrier in Major League Baseball, and then to have his wife, who's one of the loveliest people I know, and I still don't believe she's actually 90 years old, because she is gorgeous. And I've gotten a chance to know her and the Robinson family. I've said this before. That's the power of baseball. That's the power of sports. It can change attitudes sometimes in ways that a politician can never change. A speech can't change. You know, all those kids who started growing up watching the Brooklyn Dodgers, and suddenly they're rooting for a black man on the field, and how that affects their attitudes, laying the groundwork for the civil rights movement. That's a legacy that all of us have benefited from, black and white and Latino and Asian, because what it did was it taught America that it's the skills, it's the talent, it's the character, and not the color that matters. Now, we still have a long way to go. You know, that's true in our everyday life. It's true in our sports, right? I mean, if you look at the number of African American managers, if you look at the number of Latino managers in baseball or owners, obviously there's still a carryover from the past. But the thing that I emphasized in the speech today to the Cuban people, and the thing that we can be so proud of as Americans, is not that we're perfect, but that we have the capacity to change. And Jackie Robinson represents the very best of that change.
Given what happened today, was there ever any consideration to not coming to the game today? And it's clear that you're enjoying the game. Your wife in particular seems to be really enjoying the game as a baseball fan.
Well, she was upset about a couple of these.
The great catch in center field didn't sit well. She liked the catch.
You know, couple of calls, right?
A couple of the calls. I noticed the strike zone's a little wide so far, at least on the other side. But you know, you always have a little home field advantage.
That's the Chicago in you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a challenge when you have a terrorist attack anywhere in the world, particularly in this age of 24/7 news coverage. You want to be respectful and understand the gravity of the situation. But the whole premise of terrorism is to try to disrupt people's ordinary lives. And one of my most powerful memories and one of my proudest moments as president was watching Boston respond after the marathon. And when Ortiz went out and said, probably the only time that America didn't have a problem with somebody, person on live TV, was when he talked about Boston and how strong it was and that it was not going to be intimidated. And that is the kind of resilience and the kind of strength that we have to continually show in the face of these terrorists. They cannot defeat America. They can't. They don't produce anything. They don't have a message that appeals to the vast majority of Muslims or the vast majority of people around the world. What they can do is scare and make people afraid and disrupt our daily lives and divide us. And as long as we don't allow that to happen, we're going to be okay.
I've seen you throw out the first pitch. You didn't play much baseball, did you?
You know what? Now,
Eduardo, come on.
Can I just make a point? My dad wasn't a Hall of Famer. So, you know, you had a slight benefit in the whole pitching thing. I will say this, and I've talked to President Bush about this. I've talked to other folks. We do a lot of tough stuff as president, and by definition, you don't end up being president if you don't handle stress well. Nothing is more stressful than throwing out a first pitch.
I remember.
Because they just hand you the ball. And I don't care if you've been practicing behind ahead of time. When they just hand you the ball. Now, I have not grounded it. I just want to point out. But the first time I didn't ground it was because Pujols saved me. He got down real low because that thing was headed for the dirt.
No, I have another full disclosure.
Yes.
8-year major league career, and on my first pitch, I hit the screen at Wrigley Field. So
it's
don't worry
a tough
about
play.
it.
It's a tough play.
Your guy here after 9/11, Jeter, was warming up President Bush.
I remember.
And said,
"Don't choke.
Don't choke.
Well,
don't bounce it."
Jeter's tough, but the truth of the matter is that I did not play a lot of baseball when I was a kid. I was more of a basketball player, but there is something about baseball that is so fundamentally woven into our culture, and in some ways at a time in our lives where everything's a mile a minute and kids are on their phones all the time and there's just this constant stream of information. There's nothing like going to a ballpark and just everything's slowing down a little bit, and the rhythm of the game gives you a sense of appreciation about all the blessings we have, and it's still a family game in a way that is really hard to match.
So all the efforts to speed the game up by the guy behind you were okay with?
I'm actually for that. There's no doubt about that strategy. I was actually explaining to President Castro, because as we were sitting there talking, he said baseball is just too long. And I said to him, well, we got Major League Baseball trying to do something about that. You can't be stepping out of the batter's box as often as they used to.
We should have a wonderful summer of baseball. Both your White Sox and your other Chicago team both look good.
Well, I tell you what, we've had a great rotation. We've had some great pitchers like Sales. We haven't been able to hit, and we picked up a couple of guys. Hopefully, if we can just get a few hits, we'll be okay.
Just a few.
Just a few. I'm not looking for nonstop action, but just a couple of runs scored. I think our pitchers will be able to protect it.
We really appreciate you being with us very much.
Listen, it was a great honor. I appreciate everything that you guys were willing to do, and I appreciate the coverage, not just about the baseball game itself, but the approach that you and a lot of our sports reporters have taken in talking about the broader context of this, because ultimately what this game is about is goodwill and a recognition that people are people, but we can't forget that there's larger stakes involved in this. And before I came here, as I said, I met with a group of dissidents. A couple of them had been in prison just yesterday. One of them still had cuts as a consequence of handcuffs that had been placed on him. And so, we have to, at the same time, appreciate the ability for us to meet and talk and dialogue, but we can't forget the fact that families have experienced pain, and our values are ones that are contrary to some of the values here, and we got to be able to talk about that in a.
You were moved by the Abreu piece. I remember you refer to that.
It was powerful.
And one message that I have to relay to you is from my cousins here in Cuba, saying thank you for coming here.
Well, listen, you tell them that I appreciate it, and my hope is that each time I have the occasion to come back, that we're going to see greater freedom and greater prosperity in Cuba, and that the bonds between our peoples, particularly the Cuban-American community and Cuba, that those grow stronger over time. Ultimately, one of the things you realize as president is there's a lot of stuff wrong in the world, but if you have a chance to see my daughters here, the children here, my daughters were talking to President Castro's grandchildren, you hope that next generation doesn't carry over some of the scars and some of the legacies of the past.
And a pretty special moment there. Dairon Verona was just taken out in between innings so that the Rays and the fans, the commissioner, could salute. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Appreciate
Pleasure to have you here.
All right. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We have to do a selfie before you leave. You know that, right? There we
Everybody
go.
got to get in.
Let's go. Come on, Carl.
Hold on a second. Wait.
Come on.
The whole trio.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
We'll see you in the summer.
Thank you, guys.
Good.
Those that know me for something.
Hold on.
As President Obama continues to make his way out, the Cuban national team has one go down the line just foul off Matt Moore as we continue our coverage of the exhibition game between the Tampa Bay Rays and the team from Cuba. See Rene Rivera, the catcher, looking over here as
Jim Crane.
All the attention paid to Jim Crane. That's right, the owner of the Houston Astros. Slow roller, that's going to be a hit. Longoria will have no play on that. You see Derek Jeter, who has spent some time with the president. We'll hear from Derek a little later in our telecast as well. See what he's been up to. Looks like he could certainly still play.
He looks very relaxed. I saw Jeter at a restaurant the other day, and Eduardo and I went out. He's just at another level of calm right now.
He was like, you guys are still working and I'm having a nice lunch.
Buenos Aires is the president's next stop. And as he says so long to Rachel Robinson. Really neat to hear the thoughts of him, not only on a baseball level, but on a Cuba level and a worldwide level. And the crowd here in Cuba recognizes that he is making his way through the stands towards the exits, shaking hands with the baseball fans, and another round of applause, polite round of applause. It's not often, guys, you get a chance to sit and talk to the president for about 10-15 minutes. So what was your takeaway from it?
Well, you know, there's no question that there's a balance between trying to focus on this common ground and optimism, and also the challenges and the history that can't be forgotten. You know, you want to move forward off of the lessons of the past, and the past have a lot of scars here in Cuba. But at the same time, he's so good with the youth. The generation, the next generation, has a different vantage point. And yes, they hear the stories from those that came before them, but they also are charting their own course. And he's trying to capitalize on that potential of young minds, young opportunities with these new experiences where people are able to have access to each other and express those differences and chart a new course. So, you know, it's a tough balance, but you see the commitment. And this is something from Guantanamo Bay to all the other commitments that the president has for Cuba. He's very focused on this.
Moore's pitch is in the dirt. It struck me his sort of underlying statement of, if something hasn't worked for 50 years, you try to then change it. I mean, that you could say that about if something hasn't worked for 5 years, you know, or 5 weeks. But his point was that understanding the pushback on so many legitimate levels, his method currently is to not at all ignore and acknowledge the past, but, as I mentioned, focus on the present with an eye towards the future.
And you talk about the past, and even before the Castro regime, you know, here, Jose Marti, which is the just for you in the United States, he's the George Washington here in Cuba. And he quoted him today, actually, in his speech. And to me, he understands.
Look out. There is no net to protect the fans from that flying bat. And strikeout, nobody hurt as the bat bounces right off the top of the dugout.
And he quoted Marti, and he was saying every person should be equal under the laws, equal access to food, health, and education. People should have the freedom to criticize their government, elect, and get through the democratic process. And that's what he's trying to achieve by trying to communicate that message to the youth and the younger generation of Cuba, to see if they then understand what the realms of his visit here is all about.
And it's all about him also just telling his story. I mean, you talk about Jackie Robinson and what seemed impossible the year before, how he broke that color line. Well, President Obama has that story too in terms of his pathway to presidency, and that is something that resonates with people when they see the darkness and despair and finally see a person who's expanded all possibility. And you know, that is what's transformational about his presidency. Whether anybody agrees or disagrees with politics and so on, you can't deny that transformational time that he created and generated by just his history and his legacy of people who were disenfranchised and kept out of the process for literally lifetimes.
In its simplest terms, he does appear to have survived on a why not versus, you know, why, and this is another example of it. But in no way do I get the sense that he is ignoring or diminishing the very real issues and the pain that has been felt by the likes of Eduardo's family. And we've seen Dan Le Batard write a column and voice his real discomfort and dissatisfaction with an olive branch being extended to the Castro regime. I don't get the impression from speaking with him that that's discarded in any way.
Well, no, I mean, and I think of it this way. You know, regimes will change, then you have to look at what they will change into and be prepared to lay down the foundation for that.
We'll talk much more about President Obama and baseball as we continue from Havana. President Obama and Derek Jeter. You see Derek Jeter, who has spent some time with the president. We'll hear from Derek a little later. President as anybody, and we'll get a chance to ask Derek what the conversation, without prying too much. As the former captain of the Yankees, the great Derek Jeter, joins us. You guys had some what looked to be really enjoyable exchanges there. What was that about?
Well, it was all about him embellishing a golf game.
Okay.
Really, I told him I was coming after him for a defamation of character suit because he told me he gave me 30. He told everyone he gave me 30 strokes on the golf course, which is very untrue.
30 strokes?
Very untrue. I took his money, so he wants it back.
I thought perhaps he was asking you about retirement, given that he's nearing the end. You guys you could give him some tips. And what would you give him? What's the advice? You're chill now.
Don't be afraid of it. We have a lot to look forward to. So I'm sure he'll be just fine.
Yeah. Are you enjoying it? What's the Derek Jeter sort of life like relative to what it was for so many years?
It's a little bit different. It's just not so much of a regimented schedule. I sort of make my own hours, so to speak.
Pretty nice.
But I still have some sort of a schedule. But physically, I'm retired, so it feels a lot better.
Mentally, you never shut it down?
Mentally, I never shut it down, but I see now when people retire, they always take a year off and feel as though they can come back because their body feels great.
Right.
But I feel pretty good.
No announcement today?
No, guys.
Derek, now that you're at the presidential chair here,
this is big time.
What have you taken from this trip here in Cuba?
It's been an awesome experience for me to come here. I've played with a lot of Cuban players. El Duque Hernandez, Jose Contreras, Jose Cardinal was my coach when I came up.
Right.
And obviously there's a lot of influx of great Cuban talent that has come into Major League Baseball in the last few years. But just to be a part, I'm well aware of the history of the Cuban players and the Negro Leagues, and Jackie Robinson's wife and daughter are here. Just get an opportunity to experience the culture here, the passion, the love they have for not only their country, but the common language that we all share, which is baseball.
And Derek, you've sort of migrated into this publishing world, and certainly these are great stories to tell. How did that come about? You certainly kept it under wraps, but now with the Players Tribune, you have books that have come out. I bought one for my cousin. How did you get into this publishing world?
Yeah, I've always been very interested in content, and I've been very interested in people's stories. I think a lot of times, you view someone that's in a successful situation, you think they just automatically just woke up and ended up there. But there's a long journey along the way, and there's bumps in the road that they have to deal with, and I'm very interested in those stories. And when it comes to the Tribune, I wanted to give athletes an opportunity to be able to share their stories in an unfiltered, unbiased sort of way, and give them the power to set the narrative and let the media respond to things that are special and important and mean things to them.
The stories behind the stories, because there's usually always the story behind the story.
There is. I think that's not only interesting to me, I think it's interesting to everyone.
I agree, yeah. And it's often not the home run swing, it's the story that led up to the home run swing that people need to tell, that people tend to forget about.
Very true. There's a long road that comes into success, and I want to hear those stories.
When you think about the Derek Jeter story, because it's been written and talked about so many times, what would you kind of have as like first chapter, second chapter? How would you write the Jeter story in a nutshell?
I think I'm going to tell you now. I'm going to put it on the Tribune.
Boy, paid a free advertisement.
I like it. He's working.
He's sharp right there.
The brain never stops. I get it now.
I try to think.
Sitting in this seat on this side now, do you see the game in a different light?
I tell you what, I was just thinking about this. This is the first time I've watched a game from the stands. Wow. I've been back to Yankee Stadium, a few times when they retired the numbers of some former teammates, but I haven't actually sat down and watched a game. So it's kind of fun to do it in person.
Is this your first trip here?
It is.
It is
my first trip, and hopefully it'll be. Everyone will have an opportunity to come back.
Every city you go to, I'm sure, and especially if it's not in this country, because you do travel a bit, you see New York Yankee caps, right, all over the place.
I tell you what, it's. I don't want to necessarily say it's surprising because we've had a couple of the biggest Cuban stars come play for us in New York, but the amount of not only baseball fans but Yankee fans that are in this country, it's kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, the knowledge. How about the old food too? Because the food here is spectacular. Have you had a chance? Are you a coffee drinker?
I have. I've had the coffee. I've had a lot of the food.
Lobster?
I've had, yes. These two guys caught me eating lunch, and they had to go to work. I didn't have to, so I could sit down and eat a little bit longer than they could.
Do you follow Major League Baseball still? Are you in tune with it? Could you literally break down if you were sitting on the set of baseball tonight, sort of the divisions, or are we not that close to it?
No, you know what? Actually, I needed to be away from the game for a year, and I didn't watch too many games at all. Obviously, I have a lot of friends that are still playing, so I follow them, I communicate with them, talk with them. But in terms of sitting down and following the game, I haven't done it. But I'm going to start doing it again because I've always been very vocal about my next goal and desires to be a part of an ownership group. So I have to start paying attention.
How would you say that manifests itself? Because everybody has game plans. Well, how do you game plan to become an owner, other than making the millions and millions to have the money to be even considered for?
Well, one, I don't have the money to be considered. You know how much these teams cost?
Well, a part, small owner.
The first step is sitting next to that guy right there to our left, which is the commissioner. So I'm trying to get on his good side and hopefully get that opportunity.
Is that a struggle for you to get on the good side of a commissioner? You were such a terrible ambassador for the game for so long.
No, but this is a new commissioner now. It was the old commissioner.
Right.
Derek, I remember talking to Reggie Jackson at one point, being in spring training with you in 2005, and he talked about being afraid of being forgotten. Is that something that ever enters your mind? I know you're doing some new things, but the more you do, and I certainly can speak to it personally, you're further away from the game. You know, you ever have that feeling, or what do you think about, that experience?
I try to hide anyway, brother. So being forgotten, no, I'm not afraid of that. But one thing is it's surprising to hear Reggie say that, because you play in New York, and our fans, the history of our team and organization, they never forget the players that were part of the organization, especially a part of winning teams. And that's one of the special things about being a part of the New York Yankee organization.
Yankees are built on tradition, and this spring training I went over, and everybody's wondering, when is the year going to be where Derek Jeter gets back in uniform for a week as one of the Yankee legends in spring training? When can we see that? When can the fans know to go to Tampa and see Derek?
Well, I was going to let you finish that entire question before I responded, but me putting on a uniform again, I can't even think about that. When I took that uniform off, in my mind, I put everything I could into my career, and I want to give back to the game in different ways, but in terms of being back in uniform on the field, I have no idea. I can't even answer that question.
We had Rich Goose Gossage as James Loney sends one to right field, and that one is going to go. A 2-run home run for James Loney to give the Rays a 3-0 lead.
One thing I've noticed of James Loney, getting more on his backside, back through the zone a lot longer. All 3 RBIs in this day belong to James Loney.
And the ball goes out there. Are your souvenirs out here, which is kind of cool. Here's the swing. Come on, Captain. Give us the thought of the swing.
It down.
I've seen it before. I mean, James, he used to kill us. So it's fun now to have the opportunity to watch him from the stands, and I can actually pull for him.
One thing he didn't do, and where I was going to go with my previous question, was we had Goose Gossage talk about sort of the younger, brasher generation of baseball player. You're obviously not playing anymore, but where do you fall with the exhibitionism that we see from some of the younger players, be them American, Latin? I don't think it really matters.
I think the key is, obviously you're going to have players, old school players. I'm one of them. That there's a certain way that you played the game, but I think the game's evolving, and you want people to show their personalities. You want them to be them. I mean, you talk about a lot of the Latin players. I think everyone talks about the Latin flair that they have. It's fun. I mean, you come out to games, whether it's in Cuba, it's in Puerto Rico, it's in Venezuela. I've been to games all over the place, and they have a good time, and they enjoy themselves. And you may not agree with it, you may not appreciate it, but the bottom line is I don't think they're doing it to be disrespectful. I think people are just doing it to show their personality. So there's always going to be 2 sides of it. I don't think you can say one side is right or one side is wrong.
And I think that's the cycle, generation to generation. You pass the torch, and then the older generation, these guys don't appreciate it. And then you kind of get older and mature in the game. But
Doug flipped his bat one time when we were playing, hit a home run, and flipped his bat and took his time around the base. No, I'm just playing.
Maybe once. I only hit 59 of them, though, so it wasn't that many. So do you have any hobbies? I was wondering, you mentioned the publishing side, but have you discovered something in retirement?
Well, I think when you are competing every day, you got to find something, I guess, that quenches that competitive thirst. So I've sort of taken up golf, and I'm obsessed with it.
Is that why the president?
I'm going through a swing change right now, so don't judge me. But
you'll do that a lot.
I know.
That happens a lot.
I've never been so frustrated in my life in anything that I've done.
It is amazing how that's the old debate. Is it easier to hit a ball that's traveling and moving at 100 miles an hour or one that's sitting down and not moving at all?
Right now, I'd have to say the one that's not moving, sitting on the ground.
No doubt. You may still say that years from now. Well, that's great. I was a little concerned because somebody told me that one of the people you sought advice from as to what do I do next was John Kruk. I can't imagine that you would even think about consulting Kruk on what to do next.
That's a lie.
Good. Good.
That's a lie.
Thankfully, that's a lie. The American League East, as much as you don't follow exactly what's going on with baseball, we've seen in recent years the Blue Jays put together an incredible lineup. And it's been a few since the Yankees have competed for a World Series, not long by other franchises' standards, but that's, as you said, the expectation every year. The way that Brian Cashman has gone about the business of trying to get younger and stay competitive, is it possible in this day and age to do that? Or do you need to, as we've seen other teams, break it down and start over again?
I don't know if the New York Yankees will ever break it down and start all over again, because the Steinbrenner family is very big on winning. But there's been teams, there's different blueprints to win, but Yankees have been successful for a long time, and they'll figure it out.
All right, Derek, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Really good to see you. Good luck with the golf. That's Derek Jeter, who, prior to sitting down with us, got a chance to say hello and goodbye to President Obama. We'll continue from Havana.
In Havana, you'll find many different kinds of people, but the one thing they all love is baseball.
Welcome back to Baseball in Cuba. I'm joined by Dayron Verona, who played today for the Tampa Bay Rays, and Marley Rivera of ESPN Deportes. Marley, you've done the story on this guy. What was your takeaway from that story that you did?
Ya contamos la historia, ¿verdad que sí? We told the story. Dayron, what he kept telling me when we were in Port Charlotte was that he wasn't going to believe that he was going to be allowed to be back in his nation of Cuba, and he's just so proud to be back and just so happy to be back. Contento de estar de vuelta, ¿no? Eso es lo mejor, Dayron.
Sí, es algo muy impresionante.
He's just so impressed about this moment.
Es algo que cuando llegué, que pisé tierra cubana, me impresionó tanto, ya que no pensé volver en tan poco tiempo, y al ver la ovación del público que había en el latinoamericano, eso es algo que me llamó mucho la atención.
he says he has no words because the ovation, the standing ovation that he got from the Latino, like they call it here, the Latinoamericano, it's just, and the moment he touched Cuban ground, it was the most special moment for him. He didn't know he was going to be back so soon, Tim.
What was the emotion of seeing your family after so many years?
No, ver a mi hermana y a mi sobrinita que la dejé tan pequeña y de regreso verla tan grande fue algo muy, muy emocionante para mí.
The most amazing thing was seeing my sister and seeing my niece, who I left as a baby, and then I just saw her so big. I just have no words to express the emotions I felt.
And what were the emotions he felt from his teammates who gave him a standing ovation and then greeted him when he came off the field?
No, algo que tú no habías, voy a estar agradecido tanto por el equipo y por la dirección del equipo, Kevin Cash, Kevin Kiermaier, Archer, Longoria, que apoyaron que yo viniera de vuelta a mi país, ya que me pusieron a jugar, ya ven, me pusieron a jugar y no tenía tanto interés en conectar ni de hit ni de jonrón, simplemente ver la ovación esa que en realidad el pueblo cubano quiere que los cubanos vuelvan a su patria como un día jugaron.
Saying that I'm just thankful to all my teammates. You heard them all. To Kevin Cash, he listened and he said they're the reason why I'm here, and they'll never understand how thankful I am for that moment. He said I didn't want a home run. I didn't. He actually told me off camera that he needed to swing at that first pitch because they're going to keep that ball in Cooperstown for this historic moment. So para la casa la bola goes to your house.
No creo, es Cooperstown. Yeah.
Cooperstown.
Deron, thank you so much. Marley, thank you so much. Carl, back to you.
Tim, thank you. And a terrific story, and really one of the moments that they will never forget, coming out to give a standing ovation to Dayron Varona, while the Cuban crowd gave a rather muted applause to their former countryman who left 3 years ago on a boat after playing 7 years for the Cuban national team. So we're in the bottom of the fourth. It's Tampa Bay 3 and Cuba nothing. James Loney's been the guy that's done all the damage. As we've moved around the stadium, we've got a chance to talk with the President of the United States. This is a swing and a miss on a wild one from Garcia. Derek Jeter as well. Bob Lee, who has been with us, of course, on SportsCenter outside the lines, and I think has been here a day or so earlier than everybody else. Now with us here in the booth, and Bob, I think probably most people would be interested in your perspective on what you've seen happen the last 72 hours.
I'm glad you're back up here. I don't have to score the game anymore. It's good to have you guys back. I tell you, I just watching this game, you want to tell yourself it's just a baseball game, and you can lose yourself in it. The sounds, the smells, the sights. You're talking about Dayron Varona getting that standing ovation from his teammates. You realize, Eddie, as that was happening, the president was talking to you about your family. And the symmetry of that moment, I thought was just so moving. That Varona was coming out, muted applause. Obviously, this hand-selected crowd not wanting to be too boisterous. But the president was talking to you about the angst of your family and the emotions of that visit. And I just thought that moment was particularly poignant.
And to settle in that, I don't know how it's going to settle in. Not for Dayron, even for me. You know, having him acknowledge and talking about my cousins, my aunts, and the people of Cuba. It really doesn't matter. It's right now it's a united front where the people exiled are feeling emotional. Some in a tough and difficult way. Others trying to look forward. And again, I've said it all along, and I keep saying it. Last 72 hours, have been unimaginable for me with my family.
Oh my gosh!
All right, let's check on it quickly. The gloves are up. He's smiling, which is good. He's like, I'm good. Give me the ball. But in an exhibition, we'll have everybody come up to the mound. He's already telling Kevin Cash and the trainer to get back. May have gotten the glove.
It seemed like he got gloves. At least that's what he's going to say if he wants to stay in there for sure. But
it looks like he got the heel of the glove a little bit, the way it sounded. And Ron Porterfield, the athletic trainer for the Rays, had to make sure. But
You know, the images of today, there was one that we just saw there, but if you saw the 30 for 30 movie a number of years ago, Louis Tiant, the lost son of Cuba, who came back. This was before the rapprochement, when it was more difficult. Tiante came back. It was very emotional. To look down and see Louis Tiant shaking hands with Raul Castro, you catalog the images you never think you'd really see in your life. That would be perhaps on the short list.
I'm caught up in the moment, but right now I don't know if I would have done that. It's to the point where the President of the United States is right next to Raul Castro, and just a lot of emotions, and it's going to settle in, I think, once this is all over and I'm, back at home in Miami and sit down and reflect. Once I look at my kids, then I'll know.
The optics of the moment there, though, suggest let's never forget, but at some level, perhaps forgiveness to move forward, to see Tiant do that with Castro. And I keep harping on it, but I don't think anybody, by any stretch of the imagination, is dismissing the terrors of the past or even the present. But there is a literal olive branch or hand being extended, and you had a Cuban legend who fled the country to the United States come back and do that to the man whose last name represents so much to those in Cuba. Ground ball to short ends the inning. Bob will stick with us. We'll continue. A 3-0 game. Matt Moore is okay, which is the good news. Loney's gone deep. And the cars, which were new in 1950, still roll along the streets of Havana. Welcome back to a special presentation of Major League Baseball from Havana, Cuba. Today's telecast is presented by Corona Extra. The Rays got a 3-0 lead over Cuba, top of the 5th inning. Matt Moore's pitched a good game. James Loney's provided the offense with a home run and an RBI single. And we are nearly midway through as we begin this half inning with Bob Lee, Doug Glanville, Eduardo Perez. I'm Carl Ravitch.
You know, Ravi, there was a story Tony Castro told me on the field before the game. Tony is the son of Fidel. He is the nephew of the president, Raul. He is the vice president of the Cuban Baseball Federation. At a private dinner the other evening, there was Tony Castro and his wife showing Derek Jeter a photograph of their son, Raul Castro's nephew, and the grandson, actually, of Fidel Castro, wearing a Derek Jeter jersey to show you how the circularity of this game. So Jeet's jersey worn by Fidel Castro's grandson, shown by Tony Castro, who speaks fluent English and is a representative of Cuban baseball, and said to us, come back, keep coming back, keep doing this. Clearly, it fits the agenda of the Cuban Baseball Federation.
No, that's something the president spoke about, the hope in the next generation. You know, and that's where, just like baseball, when you're developing in baseball, you got to have that foundation of youth to bring about new shifts, new cultures, new ideas, new exchanges. And it doesn't happen unless you have access to each other.
You know what I've really been impressed by, too, at that party we had a chance to attend last night, so many of the Rays players talking to them, and there's Tony Castro, you had a quick look, wanting to know about this country. And yeah, I got a few gray hairs, so telling him a little bit about some of the back history, some of the things we've been reporting on SportsCenter and outside the lines. And there was a thirst for knowledge, for the history and some of the shading and the nuance that I was admirable. These guys have bought into this trip, not just the baseball, but the cultural side. It's really been an education watching them.
Steven Souza hits one to center field. And Bob, we really appreciate you joining us and your perspective, and look forward to, of course, more on Outside the Lines.
It's been a treat. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
The other players, some of the coaching staff said that, in echoing Bob's point, that because of some of the conversations, and again, driving through the streets of Havana, you see buildings which architecturally are beautiful, and the paint on them has just been worn down, and it's crumbling, and there are parts of it that are dilapidated. So there is a curiosity that these players have, and the coaching staff suggested that there'll be a lot more study done. Like, all of a sudden, it's introduction 101 to Cuba now for these players, as young as many of them are, and they believe there's an increased level of interest, that this will lead to the inquisitive minds. And you don't have to look very far from this ball field to see how much work needs to be done.
Well, what you're talking about, Carl, is education.
Yeah.
You know, and just getting the exposure. That's one thing I would say baseball separates itself, because you have that everyday access as teammates every single day. And you could go through any culture. You go back to the 60s, St. Louis Cardinals, Tim McCarver talking about being exposed to African-American players.
Sure.
Kurt Flood, and, you know, many other players, Bob Gibson. And that changed his perception. So, you know, there is a long-standing legacy in change in this game, partly just because you're getting that education, your mind's open to it.
Yeah, and you're getting the exposure. I mean, as Derek just said, this is the first trip to Cuba. People are making first trips to Cuba, some of them not 20 years old, some of them in their 50s, 60s. Rachel Robinson's making her, I imagine, her second or third trip at 92, but unless you're exposed to something, your desire to learn about it is probably more muted than those that get a chance to see it. Ground ball from Longoria to short, flip to first for the out. We're midway through, and we'll bring the Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, on board to join us when we come back to Cuba. You're taking a look at Fusterlandia. 30 years, Jose Fuster has decorated his home and the surrounding neighborhood in a tidal wave of color. Rooftop, it's almost impossible to see it all. Each piece more interesting than the last, so when you see the sign, Casa Fuster, follow it. Much of the profits earned go back into revitalizing the community. We've moved back up to our seats high above. We dragged the commissioner, Rob Manfred, up with us, so the seats are way, way better down there.
They are better.
They are way better. But the air is a little clearer up here. And it's just us four, so we can have a nice, quiet, frank conversation between the four of us. What have you made of your trip here? What was the goal coming in, if there was one? And as you leave, what are your feelings about it?
Well, it was really about three things for us. First of all, we really welcomed the opportunity to be part of the larger effort at altering the relations between the United States and Cuba. When you start having dialogue with the White House and you get an opportunity like that, your number one goal is to cooperate and be part of something that's really historic. More micro, we have our own issues with respect to Cuba. We wanted to get down here, try to build some relationships, focus attention on the issues we have with respect to player movement, and hope that we could push that process along, get us to the point where Cuban players can move freely from Cuba to the United States. And then last and longest term, this is part of our effort to internationalize the game. We think that this market here, with the change that I think we all think is coming, is going to be a market where over the long haul it'll be a baseball market for us.
And when you say baseball market, what does that mean?
Well, you know, that's unclear. It depends on how fast things change here. I think at a minimum it's a place where we would want to play regularly. You know, we're going to Puerto Rico to play some regular season games. At a minimum, I'd like to think we could do something like that here. Over the really long haul, I'd love to have a team outside the United States and Canada, whether it's Mexico, Cuba, another team in Canada would be great. And I think it's good for the game. And, you know, obviously with our schedule, there are geographic limitations on where we're going to go and play every day. And certainly this would fall within the available circle.
For sure. And given how close it is, exactly. When you think about Cuba, though, I mean, I've heard stories about potential spring training facilities down here, understanding the Dodgers once did that. But it's amazing, as you now know, what has happened to spring training facilities. It's not 2 fields, it's like 8, and you need to spend a heck of a lot of money to invest in something like that.
Yeah, we have, you know, spring training facilities that in excess of $100 million investment. And obviously, you know, you've been here for a few days, I've been here, and we've both been out and around, and a lot has to happen here before something like that's a reality.
I was wondering, it struck me, as somebody who'd never been to Cuba before and have heard all these stories about the Cuban athlete that's gotten on those rafts or boats. A few days ago, you look out at the sea and you try to, it's unthinkable that somebody would get into a small boat. Does that occur to you? Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It was interesting. Our hotel room looked out on the ocean where that seawall was in front of it. And there's a 4-lane highway, and yesterday was a very windy day, and the waves were literally breaking over the seawall onto the 4-lane highway, and you can't help but think, you know, people leave here in boats.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Rob's going to stick with us here. We'll take a break. We're through the half inning. 3-0. Rays are on top. We invite all of you to join Major League Baseball, the 30 clubs, as we celebrate opening day. Show your team pride, wear your favorite cap. April 4th, share on social using hashtag #CapsOn for a chance to win prizes and tune in all opening day action April 4th on ESPN. Rejoined by the commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, Doug Glanville, Eduardo Perez. We were talking about the conditions that some of the Cuban defectors face when they get onto the water. And then once they get to the major leagues, things obviously change, these unthinkable risks they take for those contracts. And your predecessor, Bud Selig, always talked about baseball as a social institution. So as we sit here, I'm curious what you think the role of baseball could ultimately be when it comes to the relations between these two countries.
Well, I think that you've heard it said over and over again over the last couple of days that sport can form sort of a foundation of people making relationships and trying to move forward. Over the longer haul, I think if we could get to a regularization of relations, that baseball could be significant in terms of driving the economy and driving development here in Cuba.
What's your thoughts about the youth side of the equation? We talk a lot about the players seeking this professional ranks. You've got a strong commitment in the United States about getting youth baseball, trying to educate coaches. How do you see that tying to this opportunity here between the United States and Cuba?
Well, one of the people that we invited to come with us on this trip was Steve Keener from Little League Baseball, and I know Carl's had a long relationship with him, and we formed a great relationship with him. Steve was here to explore the possibility of getting licenses in order to build some Little League fields here in Cuba. Kids here play on full-size fields. It's very difficult for younger kids, so they'd like to build some fields here. We had a great youth event yesterday just outside of Havana. Some of the legends of Cuban baseball were there. We had a large number of kids, over 100 kids participated in a clinic. The coaches from the Rays went out and actually conducted the clinic. Joe Torre was there. It's just a great day. So that's a long answer. The real short point is we want kids playing everywhere. It's not just a domestic effort. I think we've made the most noise domestically, but we want to do the same thing internationally.
With the vast Cuban community in the Tampa Bay area with Ybor City and everything, did that play into the Tampa Bay Rays being the representative of Major League Baseball?
Nobody seems to believe me about this, and it always makes me uncomfortable. But I actually have a videotape of me pulling a baseball with the Tampa Bay logo out of a big bucket that was covered with a cloak so I couldn't see in. I do. It was literally a lottery. But having said that, and I said this in the press conference yesterday, we won the lottery with the Rays. Everybody from Stu Sternberg, their players, could not have been more engaged during the trip. We were actually out at the Cohiba Cigar Factory for a tour late in the day yesterday. A bunch of the Tampa players were out there. I got a chance to talk to the players in the clubhouse before the game today. They really embraced the event, enjoyed it, and I think we're great ambassadors for our game.
Did you, when you first saw that it said Rays, just in your mind, did you say, oh, this is great?
No, I was thrilled. I really was. In a way, it's a great opportunity for us to take a franchise that maybe is not as iconic as the Boston Red Sox or the New York Yankees, put them out in front, make people aware of who their players are and what a great franchise
it's a natural fit given the history. I mean, there were youth leagues that used to play from Cuba, come to Florida, Florida go to Cuba. I believe Tony La Russa was one of the guys that came to Cuba to play when he was a youth baseball player.
I believe that story is accurate, and I think it truly was the luck of the draw, but it was the luck of the draw.
You've made other visits here. Baseball was here back in December of 2015, and at that point you had Jose Abreu here, Clayton Kershaw, so there were big-name players as well as Cuban players. And I'm wondering what you felt that day as the catch is made out there in left field to take a hit away from Logan Morrison, but what you guys were feeling that day from this.
Yeah, we really felt like the Goodwill Tour in December provided an opportunity to open relations, but more importantly, take some of our guys and give them an opportunity to come back here that they hadn't had in a very long time. It's part of our effort to be a family. We talk about the baseball family. I know both of you gentlemen know what I mean when I say that, and I think when you get opportunities like that, it's a great chance to help somebody who's part of the family. My only regret with that is that not everybody that might have been interested was able to participate, and I hope over the years that we'll have a continuing flow of people back into the country here, so that more of our guys get a chance to come back.
What do you think your first step, your first move will make now that you've taken all the information, done the reconnaissance, seen the experience so far, very positive? What do you think your first move will be after taking this all in?
I think it's really important for us to get back with the Cuban Baseball Federation and with the officials that we've been working with in Washington to see if we can nail down an agreement on player movement. I think that the key for us is to get out of a situation where we have human trafficking and people taking risks that simply are not acceptable to us. And that will be our priority when we get back to the States tomorrow.
And do you believe that any embargo needs to be lifted for that to happen, or are you more of a why not, let's figure out a way to do this?
You know, I'm in the latter category. When I think about the embargo, I hope, smart enough to realize that there are much larger issues in play with respect to removing the embargo than just baseball's issues. Sure. And I do believe that it's possible to make an agreement and progress on baseball's issues, even if the embargo stays in place for some period of time. So I do definitely fall in the latter category, and we're going to proceed along those lines.
Would this then ultimately lead to a worldwide draft? International-wise?
I think the issues are separate but related. I think that sooner or later, baseball is going to get to a situation where players enter the game broadly defined by the same mechanism, whether it's a draft that's domestic and a separate draft that covers the rest of the world, whether it's one draft. I think we need to get to a situation where players enter the game the same way. There's a certain equity to that, and I think it's important for the competitive balance of the game. There's nothing more important today in terms of competitive balance than access to entering talent. And if we had a draft that covered everybody, I think it'd be a real.
And if you have that many players now, Cuba ultimately, if it opens up for that, would that lead then to more teams? Because then you have a lot more players.
Well, let me say a couple of things about that. Number one, I want to be careful about the relationship that we make with Cuba, because as with Japan, I want the domestic product to flourish. I don't want to take all the players out of Cuba. On the other hand, I think we're a growth business, and someday I'd like to see us expand.
Rob, thanks very much. We appreciate you being with us. Safe trip back. Rob Manfred, the Major League Baseball commissioner, now understands what wrap it up means. Beautiful. and Run, the official youth skills competition of Major League Baseball. It's free for boys and girls ages 7 to 14. Play your way to the national finals and have the chance to compete during All-Star Week in San Diego. Find a local competition in your area at pitchhitrun.com. Good look at the streets of Havana, Cuba, old Havana. As we are back to action, Matt Moore still on the mound, bottom of the 6th inning.
Moore he's had a fantastic spring training. I mean, this is huge for the Tampa Rays. I mean, he had huge injury, the surgery, now getting back can really be that, almost getting back to that ace stuff he had that we saw this bright future. So, I don't believe he's given up a run the entire spring. So he
hadn't given up a walk coming into the game. And bear in mind, to Doug's point, just a couple of years ago, this guy was as good a left-handed pitcher as there was in baseball. You combine him with Archer and Jake Odorizzi, and all of a sudden, if you get some offense, I know that several of our ESPN insiders and experts really feel like the Rays can be competitive in the division. Let's send it down to Pedro Gomez, who's with Eugenio Velez.
Hey, Carl, thank you very much. Eugenio, the commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred, just said that he is hopeful that there could be a system put in place where the Cuban ball player can simply sign with a major league team, not have to risk his life.
El comisionado de las Grandes Ligas acaba de decir que él quisiera tener un sistema donde el pelotero cubano podrá firmar con un equipo de Grandes Ligas sin tener que tener el riesgo de su vida en denunciar Cuba y salir de aquí. ¿Qué tú respondes para eso?
Bueno, primeramente, buenas tardes. Ya que estás en Cuba, quizás en algunos lugares de Norteamérica hay un horario diferente. Gracias por darnos esta posibilidad de dirigirnos al pueblo norteamericano. Le damos la felicitación por la familia, en nombre de la familia Béisbol.
He wants to give thanks for this opportunity, for the Rays coming here, and wishes everybody a good afternoon.
Y darle las gracias también a los señores de la MLB y al gobierno de Estados Unidos que ha permitido este encuentro entre dos países cuyo deporte nacional es béisbol.
And to thank Major League Baseball in the United States because the national sport of both these countries is baseball.
Y puede ser una de las vías que utilicemos para que se viabilice lo que deseamos ambos, que los jugadores cubanos puedan jugar en Estados Unidos.
And hopefully this can be an avenue that opens the door where the Cuban ball player can play in the United States.
Que los jugadores de Estados Unidos puedan venir a Cuba y por qué no jugar con nosotros, que puedan venir a Cuba, equipos a Cuba y puedan ir equipos de Cuba a Estados Unidos.
And players from the United States can come and play here in Cuba, and clubs from both countries can go to each other's country to play games.
Y qué bueno si llega un día lo que queremos todos, que los peloteros cubanos no tenga que ser vetado donde está la organización de la MLB.
And how great would it be if Cuban ball players could be able to do that?
Quizás y muchos desconozcan que no es solamente en Estados Unidos, es donde quiera que existe esta organización. Hablamos también de los países del área, México, Puerto Rico, Dominicana, donde se juega AAA, que pertenece a la organización de la MLB, los jugadores cubanos no pueden participar.
And not just Major League Baseball, but hopefully it will open avenues in places like Mexico and other countries where Major League players can play minor league ball, but not Cuban ball players.
Y pienso que la política y las leyes la idean y la crean los hombres. Los hombres pueden pensar en las políticas que son desacertadas, en la política que no ayudan al béisbol y que no ayudan en la unión de los pueblos.
And laws are made by men, so hopefully men can come to the table and decide to fix some of these things and be able to have a transfer of players.
Porque es algo que sufre nuestro pueblo, pero pienso que también lo sufre el béisbol de Estados Unidos y el béisbol del área.
It's something where not just do Cubans suffer because of this, he thinks that also people in North America, in the United States also suffer, and the game of baseball suffers.
Porque queda demostrado que nuestros jugadores tienen calidad, que Cuba es un símbolo dentro del mundo del béisbol y que puede dar un buen espectáculo dentro y fuera del país.
I think that Cuba has demonstrated that our players are on a caliber and on par with anybody in the world, and that is what we want to show everyone. Eugenio.
¿Y qué deseamos nosotros? Solicitar a las autoridades que pueden hacerlo, que termine ya con este fenómeno de que nuestros peloteros tengan incluso que arriesgar su vida, arriesgar la vida de su familia, abandonar su pueblo, perder su residencia para poder jugar lo que quieren ellos. El béisbol es la mejor carpa del mundo.
Because it is a shame that players have to renounce their citizenship and only in order to do what they want to do, which is help their families by playing baseball, which is their love. Higinio, mil gracias por estar con nosotros. Te lo agradezco. Gracias por todo aquí y suerte en el futuro. Ojalá que nos vemos pronto. Carl, back to you. I just thanked him, and he's very, very happy to be here with us and was very happy to be sharing his thoughts with our audience.
President of the Cuban Baseball Federation, Pedro, we appreciate that and the perspective of the man in his position. Bottom of the sixth from Matt Moore, pitching a really good game, and he's going to get out of this one with a fielder's choice, 6-4. 6 solid innings, doesn't give up any runs. He continues an outstanding spring, and the optimism for the Rays continues to grow. Blink and you might miss this hidden gem of Central Havana. That's the narrow alley of Callejon de Jamal. It's not your typical Cuban attraction at all, and you can tell by the video here. Walls filled, floor to roof with murals. There's the smell of fresh meat, the sound of Afro-Cuban music, and this is one of the unique spots that should not be overlooked. The Callejon de Jamal, all part of the culture of Cuba. And speaking of Cuban culture, one of the legends of baseball joins us now via telephone, who's back in the United States, in Florida with the Miami Marlins, and that is the dad of Eduardo Perez, the Hall of Famer, Tony Perez. Tony, we really appreciate you joining us. I'll let you and Eduardo kind of talk about what this day means to you guys.
No, basically, you know, we talked about when me coming here, and also if he was going to come or not, and the festivities here have been great. I've been able to, you know, to see my aunt, my dad's sister, and I was wondering, you know, you've been watching this game. What are your feelings right now since you've been watching from home? Well, while we were talking earlier in the game, I get a text message from the hit king, Pete Rose, saying, you better mention that your daddy was the best all-time Cuban player. And that we all, as far as I know in my eyes, I know that. But it's just goes to show you in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, all those players you played with and you still associate with, they see you in that light. Guys, I'm going to have to go in Spanish with this one because we're going to show a video here of, en la Casa de Caridad. Enseñamos video in Caridad's house. We showed earlier video of me having dinner at the house and they cooked it up. Papi, la comida estuvo exquisita. Para que veas aquí video que puedes ver en la televisión, en la pantalla, de la familia, de las tías. Mira tía ahí. That's my dad's sister on the bottom left of the screen.
Yeah, that's where I want to be.
Senor Perez, this is Doug. Well, Senor Perez, this is Doug Glanville. What's your hopes for this first step or early step in the new relationship through baseball between the United States and Cuba? Well, you know, now spending time with the Miami Marlins organization, what's the sense from the Miami community, or through the lens of the organization? Is there any sentiment about this game? How do people feel about that?
Tony, we really appreciate you being with us and your perspective. Congratulations on joining us, and we look forward to seeing you during the season. That's Tony Perez, the Hall of Famer, nearly brought to tears by sights of his family and his son. Thank you, Tony.
Te quiero, papi.
Spring training baseball live with the MLB.com at-bat app. Stay connected all spring. Radio broadcast, video highlights, stats, news, and more. Download MLB.com at-bat, the #1 app for live baseball on your smartphone and tablet. New pitcher in the game. The throw over to first from Miguel Lajera. Been more of a dialogue about Cuban baseball and the diplomatic efforts by the United States to re-engage with Cuba. We've seen a bunch of different pitchers paraded in and out by the Cuban national team, but I think from a Rays baseball perspective, the performance of Matt Moore and the, I guess, hitting of James Loney today with a home run, just lengthen out that lineup if they could, is a good sign.
James Loney has had, quite a trajectory in his career. There was a time, he was hot. He was playing for the Dodgers, fantastic first baseman. Then he kind of fell off and battled challenges and making adjustments. And then he had this new life with Tampa, and he gained some power in his game. He's already known as a good defender, and now he's become sort of a staple to this lineup with the experience and quite a clutch hitter now, RBI. So they've benefited tremendously. And these are the type of players the Rays have built around. Players that do these pieces, the different roles, situational. They don't have the money and the resources to go out and make these big free agent signings. So they get the right piece at the right time, and they've done an excellent job at it.
See what Steve Pearce did with the Orioles last year with the 15 home runs. Mikey Matuk was the base stealer. He's now going to hit third base and be waved in. RBI for Pearce, 4-0 Rays. Matuk steals second and comes in on the RBI single.
Yeah, well, Pearce is a guy, it sets up that lefty-righty combination, so you may not see as many at-bats against righties. They have Logan Morrison to sort of complement in the designated hitter, but he's got a basic swing, not a lot of movement, doesn't have a big stride, just the hands through the zone.
And the interesting part, back in the majors, what they do with Pearce is they usually shift him. He's a dead pull hitter. Here, obviously, the Cubans do not have an advanced scouting report. They played him straight up in that hole. Usually, the shortstop will be there during the regular season.
Some of the bench players coming in now for the Rays. Kurt Casale's the catcher. He'll bat now. You saw Kevin Cash over there. He has been quite an accomplished baseball player manager, one of the very few who has been to Williamsport and played on a Little League World Series team with Tampa, and then the College World Series with Florida State, and then a couple of World Series rings at the major league level, and still the youngest manager in baseball. And we talk an awful lot about chemistry and the relationship between player and manager. How would you describe Cash's style?
A lot like Terry Francona's style. He is definitely one of his disciples. He was the bullpen coach in the Cleveland Indians organization with the big leagues with him, and very subtle. I think he had a very good college career going to Florida State. Obviously, that's my alma mater also, so I have to pull with the Seminoles. But if you look at what he has done and be able to accomplish with a coaching staff that doesn't need to be handled too much. They are excellent coaches, from Derek Shelton to Tom Foley to Charlie Montoyo. These are coaches that understand how to do their job, and he allows them to do that job, and the players feed from that.
I remember with Kevin Cash, I actually interviewed for the managerial job. They called me, and Kevin Cash deservedly won that one out. But what was so remarkable, this tells the story of Kevin Cash. His former organization, the Cleveland Indians, had such great respect for him that they helped him prepare for the interview process. They helped him really secure this job, and that really just says it all. Everywhere he's gone, he's left that kind of impact, where he has a great trail of respect, and that's a great fit for this organization that has to maximize their resources given their limited budget. So he's so far so good.
Well, I wish also the Cleveland Indians would maximize Sandy Alomars' potential, because that's one guy that needs to be managing. So get him ready, guys. Let's go.
Good point.
So the Indians knew they had Francona on the hook for a long time. They went out of their way to see the opportunity and help Cash realize it.
Yes, and he was successful.
He was, and he's been successful. All right, we got a pitching change here. Rays got something cooking. We're in the top of the 7th inning in Cuba with Tampa Bay ahead 4-0.
In 1946, Estadio Latinoamericano opened in the Cerro neighborhood of Havana, and baseball has lived here ever since. In 1946, Estadio Latinoamericano opened in the Cerro neighborhood of Havana, and baseball has lived here ever since.
Back in the 1860s or so, Doug, right? They began playing baseball in Cuba. I mean, that's 1860.
18, yeah. We're 150 years. And that was a positive diplomatic relationship tool that kicked it off. And there's a lot of strong major league teams came to Cuba. 40s, Christy Matheson, Babe Ruth. I mean, these are players that came down. And I thought 47 was such a pivot point with Jackie Robinson because it was a color line. It was truly a color line, and there was players on the Cuban side who were familiar with playing with players of all shades, but they knew that certain players did not have the opportunity to go to the major leagues where others had, and because of that color line. So they were very interested in Jackie Robinson's door opening, not just for what we saw on the American side, but for Cuba. And you think of like Martin Diego, great players like Doriente. These are great players from Cuban history who would not be able to play. They had to play in the Negro Leagues to get that opportunity. And Diego was in the United States, and he was like, what's going on? I don't understand why I'm treated this way as a man of color of Cuban descent. So they were well ahead of the United States or Major League Baseball in terms of what we would consider integration. And and that's a powerful one lesson we can learn from Cuban baseball about. They had put that stuff to rest a long time ago when it came to different shades and colors of people playing together on a team.
There's a story that goes that even after the Castro regime took over and the revolution had occurred, the Dodgers were dealing with about 6 days of rain, and he arranged to have the team come over here and play in an exhibition game against Cincinnati that drew about $2,500 for the fans that paid, I think, a peso to get in. So the Dodgers and Jackie Robinson had a fairly decent tradition and history with regards to a relationship with Cuba. They were one of the teams that put their names in the hat, if you will, to come and play in this game.
They have a great history, but he also trained in Panama that same spring training.
Right.
So it was an international, and Robinson was the second baseman who ended up converting to first base because that was the only slot open to him at the time. But the exposure to Cuban baseball early on, there was many managers in baseball, stateside that saw players who were of color, dark skin, that they said, hey, this guy's a great player. Unfortunately, we can't do anything with him stateside. And that happened well earlier in the 1900s all the way up. So, so Cuba did sort of break that barrier down from the standpoint of embracing these teams, and finally, ultimately, Jackie Robinson.
What a look there. The two former great Yankees with all the championship rings, Derek Jeter and his manager, Joe Torre.
I think they're talking about 401ks and retirement plans.
Ownership plans. How about Derek saying, I don't have the money to become an owner.
But he has the friends to get that done.
He also has the money. We don't need like a sole ownership here. This is a partnership. We can tap into those acquaintances of his.
I believe Derek knows people.
He knows people. We know Pedro Gomez, who can add to what we've been talking about. Pedro?
Well, one of the more interesting parts about fans here in Cuba and the favorite team that they had back in the 40s and 50s is that it was the Brooklyn Dodgers for the most part, and the reason was because they were the first club to break the color line. My grandfather, who really taught me the game once he came to the U.S. and was as passionate and as well-knowledged a fan as I've ever come across, told me the Brooklyn Dodgers, that was Cuba's team, and it was because of Jackie Robinson, and it was because they broke the color line, because here, as you guys were talking about, there were no color lines. Everybody played. It didn't matter what your skin color was, but the Dodgers were absolutely the favored team among most fans here.
High breaking ball gets ripped into the left field corner from Steven Souza Jr. and it's pulled foul. Well, I thought it was interesting too, and Pedro, you can continue with the conversation, but Rob Manfred made it quite clear that there are potential broader possibilities here in Cuba than just an exhibition game or even two teams, that this effort to expand, and Tim Kirkshin joins us as well, beyond the borders of the United States and Canada. This is an option, or at least he'd like to see it be an option.
Well, and in talking to Tony Castro, who is basically one of the higher ups within the Baseball and Sports Federation here, that's Fidel Castro's son, he and I were having a conversation before the game where he said, look, this has to happen again, and it has to happen every year, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a major league team against a Cuban national team. It could be two major league teams coming down for a weekend series, that type of thing.
Right. Susie gets struck out, and that gets a derisive cheer from the crowd here. Tim, what do you think about the possibilities?
Well, I'm with Pedro on this. You can't just do this once every 17 years and expect it to catch on. I mean, the Rays are talking about, boy, we'd love to come back next year. And I'm sure that's unlikely to happen. But if you're going to build any momentum, you can't have that much time in between trips to Cuba. The momentum has been built on this, and you got to continue it as quickly as possible.
I think they're going to lean on the feedback of the Rays, and we all know what that is going to be. All good to see what happens from now on. What we cannot do is still forget about the people here in Cuba. We have to make their lives better. We have to respect the people that are here and understand that it's okay, this was a great week, but what's next? It has to continue. They can't be forgotten.
And how do you think that they as a group, Major League Baseball, can put pressure on perhaps the government or some body to suggest, well, we'll come back, but as Eduardo has verbalized, we want to assure that the Disney World experience that these guys are getting somehow translates to improved quality of life for those who live here that don't have Disney World experiences. Is that something that is sort of part of an agreement? And how do you see that manifesting itself?
That's the big question. That's the one where we have to get all our heads together and figure this one out, because being here the last 72 hours and talking to people and seeing how, yes, of course they're happy. They're happy to see new faces. They're happy to see the money come in. I know the players, they were tipping everyone out of control because they know that, one, they were serviced well, but two, they're in need. They're in need, and they understood that. And they want them to be equal. And again, until this government, this regime is here, that's going to be very difficult to accomplish. Baseball does wonderful things. I hope it can really do its best work here from now on.
And really, Carl, part of that also, and Eduardo, is the fact that, you know, Rob Manfred believes that sports can open the dialogue. And he pointed to the Chinese-U.S. relations that were so strained in the early 70s and how ping pong, of all sports, helped open that conversation up. And certainly baseball is a much stronger sport between the United States and Cuba. And the people I've talked to here in Cuba this week have all said, look, there is finally conversation taking place. So that is something that we have not seen in over 50 years. So there's definitely optimism here.
Let's not forget, this is a big country. This is just, yes, the capital, the biggest city. Let's not forget about the rest of Cuba.
Richie Schaefer gets a chance to bat with the bases loaded here for the Rays, and we've highlighted some of the superstar players at the major league level who have left Cuba, but there have been superstar players in Cuba who are still trying to establish themselves over at the major league level. Perhaps some of the most famous names in Cuban baseball history as Schaefer grounds to short to start a 6-4-3 inning-ending double play. I'm talking about the Gurriel brothers. We will look at their story from today as we continue baseball here in Havana, Cuba, between the Rays and the Cuban Nationals. We're back, and we welcome you to the special presentation of Major League Baseball from Havana, Cuba. Today's telecast is presented by Corona Extra. Eduardo, the Plaza Vieja there, and the signage above this revamped Estadio Latino Americano. The revamping of this building is a story unto itself. We'll continue with these special telecasts in July. We plan on being at Fort Bragg, and the man that's in charge of rebuilding this field is heading in that direction to begin an entire field build down there as well. I mentioned going to break, guys, the Gurriel brothers, and Eduardo, there are a few names in Cuban baseball more real present than any who conjure up images, and these are the two guys in Cuba watching the game. I'm sorry, in Miami. I misspoke. I said Cuba. They're in Miami watching the game. Imagine what seeing this means to those guys.
I can only imagine. And Julieski, which at the age of 23 represented Cuba in the 2006 World Baseball Classic, and all the rumors were if this kid leaves, oh my goodness, he was going to be a superstar. Well, he's finally defected along with his younger brother Lourdes, which a lot of people say, and a lot of scouts here say that he's even better than Jurieski was at that age, at the age of 22. So the talent pool is there in the family. The gene, the older brother Jurieski plays in the Can-Am League in Canada. You also have the father, which is very well known here in Cuba, and that was the biggest shock of all when they defected to go towards their dream, to try to accomplish their dream of playing in Major League Baseball. And now time will tell how far they can get once they sign professionally.
Yeah. Uriel, one of the most accomplished players in Cuban baseball history. And you do wonder, as you think about Cuban baseball, and I got the impression from the commissioner of Major League Baseball that in spite of any embargo that may be in place and or lifted, that there's a sensitivity towards trying to do their best to maintain the integrity of Cuban baseball. They have their Serie Nacional, Eduardo, and you're all familiar, and so is Pedro, on what this competition means. Starts with 16 teams. They're currently down to their final 4, and then ultimately they're going to play a second season to determine which team will eventually play in the World Baseball Classic.
And this is actually what led to the defection, starting with Ray Ordóñez also, for example, and a lot of position players. If you're from, for example, if you are from Matanzas, you can only play, that's a beautiful play, great communication. But if you're from Matanzas, you can only play for that province. You cannot play for another province. So if there's a shortstop that is better than you are at that position, or that he's been around, he's a veteran, he will be the one to play all the time. You're going to be bench. And that's what happened to Ordóñez here in La Habana when Germán Mesa was the shortstop for that team, the national shortstop, and he was never going to play, so he had to defect.
So the question is, how do you maintain the integrity of the Cuban baseball at the same time allowing Cubans to leave to come to the United States and play? We will ask that question when we continue. 7 in the books, 2 innings left. Tampa Bay is going to 4-0 lead. Welcome back. Estadio Latinoamericano has been the home for the Rays in the Cuban national team. This is a team that hasn't seen this field for quite a while, as Doug Glanville joins me again in the booth with Pedro and Tim down on the field. The construction, which apparently was used 6x6 inch pieces of sod to lay through the infield. I mean, you think about tiling a backsplash or something. That's what, in a sense, they were doing with tiny squares of grass.
I would say like tiling your garage. I mean, this is. It took them 4+ days to just do that. So meticulous detail, trying to get this stadium, up to speed, and did a nice job. As many as noted who had been here, sort of the first time they investigated the site to now, they've done a great job of getting it to this level.
Tim, the idea that this field was what it was probably 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago even to what it is now has stunned a few people.
It really did, Carl. It was unplayable 5 weeks ago. Wow, look at this.
Big shot. This one to center field, but it's going to hold up on the wind, Tim.
Wow. Carl, this field was unplayable 5 weeks ago, and they brought in a groundskeeper from Roanoke, Virginia, and he fixed it up with a great deal of help. He told me the mound was 16 inches high, which is way too high. So they raised home plate in order to make it even with the mound. That's what they had to do. And he told me, and this speaks to many of the things that Eddie has been talking about all day, that when a grounds crew guy emptied like a bag of dirt, they would not throw the bag away, the empty bag away. They would keep it. They would put it in their pocket because they would use it for something else. And that just goes to show you what things can be like here in Cuba and how much work had to be done to take this field from unplayable to make it very nice for today.
Commissioner of Major League Baseball there with the president of ESPN, John Skipper. ESPN's commitment to this event from SportsCenter and its hours of live coverage with Hannah Storm, Bob Lee, Outside the Line. ESPN Deportes is here as well. We've lost Eduardo, who's over there adding some insight and perspective. So on a variety of different platforms, you've been able to consume the coverage from Havana, Cuba. And not only multi-platform, Doug, but multi-language as well.
See.
Muy bueno. I think it does speak to the significance, though, given what we've seen with the influx of Spanish-speaking baseball players, the importance of being able to communicate in that second language, especially in the baseball circle.
And baseball, has been able to come a long way in celebrating the diversity and languages. And now, as Commissioner Manfred mentioned, the expansion. There, player from China, a player from South Africa, just looking to gain this sort of cultural revolution and playing together on this with the singular mission as what a team has, that goal of winning a championship. So. He recognizes that exposure is so critical to relationships, and that's something that Rachel Robinson reinforced about the necessity to come together is the only way to have progress. You never know, and there's so many examples historically through world history of situations where people were able to overcome great odds, difficult past, to find new days, and it's all across the world. From Japan to Korea to South Africa.
Right.
So the long-term perspective provides a lot of hope, and you cannot dismiss the past. You have to use that as a way to look ahead.
Throwing error allows Brandon Guyer to reach first. I think another great example of it, and Rob mentioned Steve Keener, the president of Little League Baseball, is when you see the teams that are now competing at the Little League World Series and the tournaments to get there, but the teams that are getting there now, whether they be from Africa, Canada has become much more of a formidable Little League team. And if you want to grow the game, they've clearly identified youth, and youth not only in the United States but elsewhere. You can see the level of play in those countries rising, and you can see it on a yearly basis. Another play at short. This one made. And that'll be the third out.
Fantastic play. Sliding on the backhand side. Not only gloving it, but the transfer to get it and an accurate throw to boot.
That was Yordan Maldalani getting it done. And we'll continue from Havana. Welcome back, everyone. The Floridita, made famous by Ernest Hemingway. Often a visitor. You can see his name there on the outside. In between innings, Pedro had a chance to speak with the manager of the Cuban national team.
Victor, ¿qué está pasando con el equipo?
El equipo está jugando un buen juego de béisbol. Y como aquí a giras, no hemos hecho errores. Algunas jugadas tácticas y eso ahí que no nos ha salido bien, pero no hay pensamiento. Pero el equipo ha jugado buen juego de pelota.
Asked him how the game has gone so far for him. He says, so I think we played a very good game. We've got 6 hits, and there's a play there that tactically we did wrong, but we're playing okay.
Lo que te decía ahorita que el zurdo de Amor con 2-1 se viró porque era posibilidad de robo de base. Ahora en 2-0 nuestro pitcher no se vira y nos robó fácilmente la segunda. Son problemas técnico-tácticos que nos faltan cositas. Yo creo que estos juegos vienen bien para seguir puliendo esas cosas, porque el conteo de que los jugadores se pueden ir, hay que virarse. Y no se viró y salió libremente. Y esa carrera anotó. Después vino Gil y anotó.
Yeah, Victor, gracias. The tactical issue was that with a 2-0 count, our pitcher should have turned and thrown to first instead. We've been doing it on 2-1, but at 2-0, he's got to. And he said, right now, one of the biggest issues with Cuban baseball is that we're not thinking the way we used to. You have to think through the game, and these are the issues. They're in a very tight situation where they're having to really teach the game to a lot of these younger players that aren't as experienced as the ones that have left.
No, Raul Santos, Pedro, just strikes out. Thank you very much. And here's your teachable moment as he dealt with the lefty Xavier Cedeno, who's now on. Let's bring Tim Kirkshin in. We had an interesting journey over to Cuba. We spent about 7 hours in an airport terminal. And Tim, we had a lot of trivia questions that were asked. So as you're looking out at the mound and seeing Xavier Cedeno, how many players in Major League history have the first name Xavier?
Well,
and I'm not setting you up.
Nady, that's the only other one that I know. I'm sure there's some others. We've never had anyone with a last name that begins with X, which I'm waiting for. That's the kind of things that I really like, because I have nothing else to do with my life. But yeah, we had a lot of time to kill, Ravi, at the airport hangar the other day. So I threw a couple trivia questions. One guy eventually told me, "I hate you now," because the questions were so ridiculous and so hard.
Well, I mean, we have baseball fans watching. Why don't you just throw one of the questions out there so more people can fall into that category?
Well, it was really dumb, but it was Curtis Granderson's birthday the other day, so I asked for the 6 players in Major League history that have hit 40 homers in a season with 10 or more letters in their last name.
My goodness.
Granderson being one of them. And this poor guy who tried so hard, he forgot Rico Petrocelli. I've seen him 5 times since the other night, and every time he just shakes his head and goes, Rico Petrocelli. How could I forget that?
Well, we'll let the fans at home kind of think about it for a while. Many of them likely will go to their computers and look it up. But to answer the question I asked you, Tim, I couldn't name them either. But the Rays media guide says there have been 7 players in baseball history with the first name Xavier.
There you go. That's great. Xavier Avery, I think, is one of them. That's another one. Well, we're not going into this now on the air, right? No. We're waiting for the last name X.
This guy, this Xavier, though, very effective so far. He is 29 years old, and because the Rays seemingly always have young pitchers, at 29, he's the oldest pitcher on their 40-man roster.
Well, you know, that's how the Rays have built, you know, the strength of their organization. It's youth, it's development, it's players that can accelerate development through maturity, and it's anchored by a young pitching staff. And pretty much you hit 30 in this organization, especially in the starting rotation, you're already looking to the next pasture to go to. So, you know, that's how they capitalize. They understand how value plays and how expensive players get at certain ages with certain productivity, and they stay under that radar and, you know, trade to get value for young players and do it all over again.
It's always been an interesting and a fun organization to watch because they tend to have younger, more athletic, more aggressive players, but their pitching has always stood out as their benchmark. And that guy there, Archer, as the leader of any staff, you know, there are maybe no leaders of staffs that you'd rather have.
He's fantastic, and I had a chance to talk to him years ago in Detroit before a game. He was still coming into his own, trying to find the slider in the slot, and he talked about their pitching coach Mike Hickey. And talking, he said, "Look, you have a chance to be legendary."
That ball's hit to right pretty well, ranging over there in the sunshine. That ball gets down. Sousa's going to have to chase it.
Yep.
And the Cuban fans here got some reason to cheer with a triple. There's Vane Alarconen's up on third base.
The ball slicing away. That's a tough play because when it's slicing like that, you're running for it. You know that if you miss it, it's going to roll around. So you try to either get in front of it, somehow get your body, or back off. So he got in between, and that slice just played it off to the side. Automatically, that's 3 bases. You're hoping it's not 4 as an outfielder. I was mentioning that, so correction, it's Jim Hickey. I'm thinking of a player I played with in Texas A&M back in the Cape Cod League. But he talked about Jim Hickey's advice to Chris Archer. And, you know, Hickey emphasized, said, look, you have a chance to be not just a mediocre good pitcher. You could be fantastic, excellent. So they found a way to put the training behind the message. And it really stuck with Chris Archer of his potential.
Maleta hits one on the ground. The Rays were in a shift. Not that it affected that outcome, but the Rays have brought the shift to Havana, Cuba. For the second time, they get a runner to third. And for the second time, Jim Hickey and his staff strand the runner at third. This special presentation of Major League Baseball from Havana, Cuba is presented by Corona Extra. Corona, who invites you to find your beach. There is an awful lot of ocean around us here as we just crest the 5 o'clock hour here on the same time zone as the East Coast. And we got a chance to spend some time with the President of the United States, Barack Obama, who was on hand today and spent a few innings watching the game and then joined us for a fairly lengthy conversation. He got part of the wave in with Raul Castro there, and Michelle Obama has proven herself to be a far more expressive baseball fan, although the standing O and the safe sign there from the president shows he's no slouch when it comes to the couch and watching sporting events.
And trash talking. And trash talking.
He was complaining about the strike zone.
We've reached the 9th inning as our spring training season now in mid-season form. We have more games coming up. One on Friday, another one on Monday. We got a game on Thursday. Cubs and the Giants. Pierce hits that one up the middle, dropped by the second baseman, but the time allows him to throw him out. Get the sense we're going to see a lot of Cubs on ESPN baseball coverage this year. They'll be the story going into the season.
I saw the Cubs did a Cubs Diamondbacks game last week, and
we know.
Oh, that's right. It was 15-4. Young team, exciting, aggressive, fearless, and got a little swagger now after last season. They're going to be dangerous. They are tough.
Odds-on favorite, according to those in Las Vegas, to win the World Series, and of course that would be the second curse break by Theo Epstein and his administration that have been over 100 years.
Don't tell that to the Cardinals, though.
Yeah, or the Pirates, or any other team in the National League, the Mets, or these guys right here in the American League. I mean, you got to get to the World Series to win it, and there are a lot of folks who believe that the American League Central and East divisions are wide open, with a couple of teams in the West that seem to be the pick by many to be competitive. Talked about the American League East last year, and I know we did on that show, Doug, that you guys preempted so much with a 15-4 score, but we had done a variety of segments for ESPN.com in which Fangraphs basically has no team winning more than 88 games, I believe, in the American League East, and no team really losing more than about 80. So they had 5 teams, maybe with the exception of the Orioles, if memory serves me, that weren't within the realm of possibility of winning the division. You agree with that? All 4 or 5 of them?
I think the Blue Jays are going to run away with this division.
You do?
Yes. I think they're going to run away with it, and Doug is shaking his head, and I love that he shakes his head.
Eddie the outlier.
Right now.
No, I have the Blue Jays in the playoffs. I think the Red Sox are going to be very good this year. Very good. And
I'd be concerned.
But, you know, the league is happy in that sense because they have more parity. You know, that's what you're talking about, these 2 divisions. And as a ball player coming up when it was so top heavy and the haves had more, it's nice to go to camp knowing you have a shot to win. And all those teams you mentioned in the Central, you know, they can win because the talent is spread out, the opportunities there. It's not just about money.
Well, and Fangraphs, again, for the second year, doesn't show a tremendous amount of respect for the Royals. Again, they project them to have about a 500 or below 500 season. So I'm not sure there's a team in the American League. I think the Cubs are the standout by most people's opinions in the National League. But you're right. What team in the American League goes this season? It used to be we've had this conversation and the Royals wouldn't have a chance. Well, they've been to 2 World Series. The Twins wouldn't have a chance. The Twins' youth may be as good as any in baseball and were competitive all the way to the end last year. What team can you look at and just discount?
Discount? Whoa.
Just discount. No chance.
I mean,
Athletics.
Yeah, they might have some trouble. Seattle might have some trouble. You know,
because there are fans in Seattle.
Pitching.
We got Felix back. We're feeling good.
I mean, that's the beauty of it. You know, they spent so much energy in the league trying to get this competitive balance tax, right? To spread the wealth, spread. You know, it's accomplished the goal. Like, look at last season. All these teams that weren't even in the postseason the year before were like didn't have money. They were all in the postseason. I mean, Houston got in there, Astros, who were like buried years.
They were always part of the conversation of they are not getting
right.
in
The
this
Mets,
year.
the Rangers, these teams seemingly came out of nowhere. So that's a good sign for the fact that it's a possibility of winning. All these teams have a shot. So it is hard. It's harder and harder to make that statement. Like the Rockies aren't going to be in it. I think they'll have trouble, but it's hard to say across the board. There's a lot of teams that are going to have a shot this year.
I'll tell you one team that's really good is the Texas Rangers.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They are a deep team.
Good pitching. Get Darvish back in what, May?
And that's when that division has to be really careful. They get that deep. They stay healthy. Prince Fielder proved that he is healthy last season.
Yeah, they're tough. I mean, the San Francisco Giants, even year they always talk about, but they went and got Samardzija and Cueto. I mean, give a pitching staff to Bruce Bochy, and you're golden.
And I prefaced it with American League because there are definitely teams in the National League, 2 in the National League East, that are absolutely in the rebuild mode. I mean, the Braves are not going to be competitive this year. The Phillies are not going to be a competitive World Series type team this season. The Angels have Mike Trout.
Yes, they do.
The Angels have Trout. Playable?
That win.
No. The win took it all the way into the bullpen over there.
Mike Trout is, he's generational talent. I mean, he is. And I've been fascinated by the fact in the offseason he's doing the weather report. He's obsessed with weather. And he did the weather for New Jersey. It's incredible that, he wants his own satellite assessment of the weather so he can report. So, you're seeing players with great talent. And in the world of social media now, they're doing other things, like you mentioned with Chris Archer or the Rays. And that's good for baseball. That's good for kids to see the example of having many passions.
Trout has got like a man crush on Jim Cantore.
I used to have a man crush on Jim Cantore.
He
He used to be right in the middle of every hurricane. I don't know how he got there, but all of a sudden Jim Cantore is in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Then all of a sudden it diverts down south and he's in. The wind just blows him somewhere else. Charleston. Then he goes down south. Then all of a sudden he's up north in a northeastern. He's in the middle. Have you seen him?
I'd like to see if we could do a telecast, standing in a storm or something. See how that would go.
It's a rain out, Doug. That's what it's called.
I'm sure, though, the wheels are turning already in that truck. That's a good one. How do we do that? And in fact, if we're in a dome stadium, maybe Doug just does it from outside when the wind and the rain are blowing.
Yeah, I got to spice it up. I'm doing these games from the outfield. I got to go next level. Maybe on a light stanchion.
We've seen you with the umbrellas out there.
Parking lot.
Yeah, last year, Schulman and Schilling and Kruk were just huddled under umbrellas.
So were we in Colorado, right?
Colorado. I was standing in water. It was awesome. It was awesome.
There was standing water and you were standing in it?
Yeah, I didn't have the right shoes.
Souza on the ground, and that's the third out. 3 different pitchers to get 3 outs. It's one of the most familiar sights in Cuba. Matacon will continue. 3 outs away from wrapping it up. That time of year again. MLB.TV Premium. Everything you have come to expect and more. New low price for 2016. Watch every out-of-market game of all 30 teams live in true HD on over 400 supported devices. Blackout and other restrictions apply. Visit MLB.TV for details. That wind is going to get that one out of play. Jesus Colome has come on to pitch for the Rays. And the wind has been a factor today here as the fans, many of whom have filed out of Estadio Latinoamericano. They got a chance to witness Major League Baseball back here for the first time since 1999 when the Orioles played here. I should say Alex Colome. I believe I called him Jesus. Alex Colome. His numbers last year, the Rays have done a bit to improve their bullpen. Brad Boxberger not available to pitch today.
And you can tell with the Cuban offense how weak it's been compared to the past. Not a lot of power hitters anymore. All those have defected. Search of their dreams. And Victor Mesa said it yesterday in our show in Baseball Tonight. He said, listen, we're going to have to minimize our mistakes on the bases. And we saw a pickoff earlier on by Matt Moore at first base. Fundamentals, that's what he wants, fundamentals.
What do you think, if any, impact is there to the Cuban Baseball Federation to witness what you just said, to suggest we're not what we once were? I get that they recognize it, but now you get a chance to see it in the literal sense.
Right. There's just not enough. They're not as athletic as they once were. Yes, the potential is there, but the development is not. Those elite players, like the Céspedes and the Abreu's and the Leonis Martin, they're not the same. Rusney Castillo, you can tell the game is just a little bit too fast for them.
This is just a short list of the notable Cuban-born baseball players. I know that Tim Kirkchen has spent some time kind of coming up with the all-star team of Cuban baseball players. These guys would all be on it.
And I really loved what Jose Fernandez said earlier today about, listen, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that right now with the regime being there. I wouldn't represent the country. Go back as a WBC if that's the way it would be. You see different perspective from Rusney Castillo, but at the same time, you have to respect Jose Fernandez, and you have to respect the Cubans that are in Miami right now that are upset that this is being done. I mean, my heart goes out to everyone of it's in Garcia Seafood that is totally against what is going on here.
This may be their first run. It is a home run on a two-strike pitch. Those that stayed now have reason to celebrate.
And with two strikes, you better throw that breaking ball on the ground. If you hang it, you're just helping the bat speed and the barrel get there. You have a fastball like Alex Colome, you do not hang a breaking ball.
Rudith Reyes with the home run to give Cuba its first run of the day.
See how late all the players are, then all of a sudden you throw a pitch like this. A breaking ball up in the zone.
And you saw Hank Conger, the catcher, gesturing down, get it down, get it down. And he did not. It was belt high. A little backspin on it.
Beautiful. A souvenir. Now Juan Carlos Torriente. Another 0-2 count from Colomé. Oh, the fastball threw it out of the zone. He's throwing as hard as anybody has thrown today.
That pitch right there, excellent pitch. That's what you want with 2 strikes. Don't let him get too comfortable. After hanging a slider for a home run, you need to be able to establish that inside part for Colomé. It'll make everything else now open up in the zone. Watch the hips of the hitter. Ball was up in the zone, but they were flying open.
He's like, wait a minute. Once again, Colomé was up in the zone. Got to get that buried. Down, down, down.
Torriente would have been fortunate to do anything with that pitch. And Reyes continues to celebrate the home run. Right off of the chest protector of Hunger. You could hear the crowd, as Eduardo mentioned, it felt somewhat like a soccer match earlier today with the cheering. You can hear the horns blowing in the background as well. All of this disappears for the Rays when they head back to Florida for spring training. Fought it off, and it's a fair ball into the corner and right. Torriente to second base. He's in there with a good piece of hitting on a fastball that was up.
Yeah, it's a nice piece of hitting because he started to commit to going the other way, allowed the ball to get deep, so he kind of covered his bases on the fastball and the slider. But look at his head position. He was guiding it the entire time, committed to going the other way, gave himself a chance to see if the ball was in the zone and just sort of flicked it down the line. And now he's putting himself in the scoring position. You know, we have a game here, 4-1, 1 out, runner in scoring position.
All of a sudden, the exhibition nature of it starts to feel more like a game that matters. Colomé has given up a home run and now a double with 1 out in the 9th inning. Yonder Orioles bats now. First pitch, ground ball. Flip to Colomé for the second out. Matt Moore started it, pitched well for 6 innings. Should be noted that the last left-handed pitcher from the majors to start a game in Cuba was Sandy Koufax prior to Matt Moore, and Moore had a Koufax-like outing today.
Moore looked fantastic, very sharp, as he's been pretty much all spring.
We talked to him a couple days ago, and he knows, you could tell the confidence he has now on that mound. Doesn't have to worry about his arm every pitch he makes. He is out there. He was just as dominant today as he was his rookie season.
Guillermo Aviles, last chance for Cuba. Wild swing and a miss on a changeup.
They're trying to sneak on that fastball by Colomé. Good strategy.
You think about Archer, Odorizzi, and Matt Moore, assuming he continues this as pitching in the American League at all goes. That's as formidable a top three as you may find in the game in the league, right?
And formidable in terms of best hair also. The hair thing is going really well for those guys.
The Mets win it in the National League, but the Rays got it in the American League.
The fashion,
yeah.
the hair fashion. But, you know, if they're healthy, this team is going to do well. They've had some problems in their bullpen in the past in health, but, you know, they're going to catch the ball, they're going to pitch, they're going to be fundamentally sound on the bases. You know, they're not going to necessarily hit a lot of home runs, but that's always been their game. And, you know, Archer is a bona fide ace. He's an all-star. He's a guy, every time he touches the ball, they have a great chance of winning. And, you know, his division has changed a lot. You know, David Price moving to Boston. So, you know, they have a legitimate shot to get to this postseason.
He's my Cy Young winner this year in the American League, Archer. Colome's gone to 0-2 on each of the hitters he's faced, and this count goes to 2-2.
Well, as a hitter here, you're just trying to force them to make a play. You get on base, somehow all of a sudden, tying run. And so, you know, they're very close to putting a lot of pressure on the Rays.
Not going to happen on a strikeout to end it for Colome. And the Rays come and win it by a final score of 4-1. On a day that will be remembered for much more than baseball. We'll come back to put a bow on what has been a memorable 72 hours, and including the last 4 here in Cuba. Tampa Bay a winner over Cuba by a score of 4-1.